across immeasurable distances in space, through the vast tracts of time, amongst the furthest flung of the galaxies, I have met with the strangest creatures in the universe, Daleks, Cybermen, even the dreaded Wogan from the planet Shepherd's Bush, and long green slimy things with tentacles and stingers, and strange orifices that leak unpleasant liquids. But now, BBC Three presents the slimiest of them all. Roland Rat, the series. Yeah!
Time for Type 40, your live stream Doctor Who show materialising here on the Spacebook channel. Whatever time, stream or time zone you're joining us from, and we're all over the place again this time. Welcome. Yes, this is Type 40 Live, hitting your screen in real time with our brand of interdimensional content and conversation here on YouTube and Facebook and across all major podcatchers too, as always. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Have we got a show ahead of us? It's time to party, to pop the party poppers like this. No? Yeah, so sort of. It nearly went. It's time to, put up the bunting, pop your cork, and join us here in the console room for more Doctor Who talk. This is where we talk about the world's longest running, best loved sci-fi and fantasy series and that whole Whoniverse around it, both on and off screen. And I'm Dan Hadley, Birmingham's king of the geeks. I can't wait to get started celebrating one person in particular here on the show. No, it's not me. Somebody far more important and significant to all of us Doctor Who fans. Of course it is. We'll get to him and them in a minute. But first of all, I'm going to remind you, as always, that please, you're going to be having far too much fun later on, aren't you? So please like the video now, subscribe to the channel, check you're still subscribed, and hit the cloister bell so you get all the notifications about what we're doing next and when we're doing it. Yes, it's a special occasion this time, and you know what it's like in the Doctor Who community. We love to celebrate, don't we? We don't need a great deal of encouragement. The times, the places, the stories, but especially the faces. When it comes to those Doctor Who legends who've entertained us over the years and decades, the names on the credits themselves, few have made a bigger impact and been as engaged with the fan base than the actor, writer, and personality Colin Baker. The colourful, passionate and verbose Sixth Doctor, Colin, turns 80 today. And this is a fitting occasion for us to look back at his life, his work and contributions to the Whoniverse, both off and on screen. On across all media, of course, as he's known for, both on telly and in the audio Doctor Who universe 2, Colin Baker, seems to know no bounds, and he's as courageous as the character that he portrayed on television for 2 and a bit seasons back in the mid-80s. I can't wait to get stuck into it. Never really need much encouragement to go back to the 80s, but I do have a couple of people with me. I'm not sure how they feel, but we'll start with her, because she was born long after the mid-80s, and she's fond of reminding me, but she's here anyway to join in. It's Queen Charlotte Shields.
Well, somebody has to, Dan.
Hello, welcome back. You okay?
Hello. Yes, it feels nice. We've actually got summer back. It actually feels like we're getting there finally.
It does. It's all kicked off. It's very, very bright out there, almost as bright as Colin Baker's
Almost.
Sixth Doctor. Yeah, it's so much to get stuck into on this one. Obviously, this is a little bit before your time, but then again, most of the classic series, all of the classic series is before your time, isn't it? And you've sort of been uncovering it bit by bit, haven't you?
Yeah, and to be fair, I've loved having that ability just to sort of like gradually go through it and sort of bit by bit watch some each Doctor and get to know them, which I've really enjoyed doing.
I think that when you look back across the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s in particular, it still seems like it's all connected, doesn't it? I mean, I was there for a good chunk of it, and it seems that way to me. Like it's almost contained, really, and it's because the format was different and the budget was different, and there's a sort of continuity there in the same way that there is in the new series. And to pick out.
I think each Doctor, basically from Davidson onwards, each of their era, it screamed the time it was made. And that's what's always come across to me. In Colin's era, you know exactly it was 80s. From every bit of graphic, from certain story elements you can tell, and from Colin's Doctor himself, the choices they made, I think, very much reflect the times. And I think Doctor Who I love that. It's a show that's been around for so long now. It does have that reflection for each era, and I think that should always be celebrated.
What I love about Colin Baker in particular, I mean, I love them all, of course I do, but we've all got our favourites, and they've all got their strengths. But I really admire Colin, how he has stayed with the character and evolved it, and I think he's relished every opportunity to take it further, really, on the television, obviously, and on stage, even in print. He's the only Doctor Who actor to have ever written an actual Doctor Who story. We'll probably come to that later on. And of course, in audio, now this man has recorded 160 plus audio dramas too, as the Sixth Doctor, again evolving his character and deepening his era to a far greater extent than it ever was on television, and yet it all seems so right. And I think we've got several people here who are joining us in the live chat who are about to have their takes too. So what we'd like you to do is to comment along with your favourite stories, of course, your favourite stories, moments, scenes, lines, and everything else from the Colin Baker era, be it on the television or on audio. We want it all. And whether you found it back in the day then, in the 80s, whether you were a child watching those stories roll out originally, or if you've seen them since on cable or BritBox, VHS, DVD, Blu-ray, however you found them first, we want to hear from you. So yeah, keep those comments coming in the live chat. And joining us on this one, we have two experts. I think he's channeling the Sixth Doctor himself. He already gave us a blast of some of the lines back there in the green room earlier on. I think with a little prompting, he may lurch into it again. We'll have to see how the evening goes when we bring in Ian Kubiak from Cygnus Alpha event.
You're expecting someone else? Hello, everybody. Good evening.
You even have the eyes, like his eyes, which is so good.
I'll give him back later.
Lots of face acting. Yeah, good to see you, mate. It's been a while. How are things?
Excuse me. Great. Yes, absolutely. Yes, I was having a drink. There we go. Brilliant. Thank you. Yes. Happy birthday, Colin Baker.
Happy birthday, Colin Baker. And filling out the panel this time too. He's back. Yeah, he can't say he wasn't warned after the last time. He was here just a week ago, but here he is again from Dallas over there in America. We've got Adam, the Geeks Handbag, back on the show.
Howdy, everybody. Howdy.
We didn't scare you off, did we?
There's no getting rid of me now. As you see, now you've had me on once. There's just no getting rid of me.
I'm wearing a fabulous T-shirt again.
Well, I feel a little underdressed compared to Ian, actually. But my TARDIS wardrobe is very limited here in Texas. But yeah, but it's nice to see
it's
you
a good
represent.
one. Electric. You've gone for the electric, whereas Ian has gone for definitely for the team colours. Team Baker. Yeah, I think he'd be very, very proud. So yeah, this is us sending a rousing, resplendent happy 80th birthday to our Doctor for the evening, Mr. Colin Baker. Now, I'm old enough to remember these stories originally going out. I don't know about you two guys. So, Ian, how about you? Were you around when these were originally on?
I was born just before Colin Baker became the Doctor, and I vaguely remember my first ever Doctor Who memory is the last 2 episodes of Trial of the Time Lord. I must have been about 4 or 5, and I can remember the hands coming out of the barrel and grabbing this man, and I have that memory as a child, and that's stuck with me ever since. And that was my first introduction to Doctor Who.
Wow, so the myth is obviously that the first Doctor that you ever see becomes your Doctor. Is that true for you?
No, because I would say Sylvester is my Doctor if you had to choose. But for me personally, Colin Baker has had such a huge impact on my life as an actor, as he as an actor, and also as the Doctor. You know, he's been so lovely, and I think we'll talk about that as we carry on talking later on.
We absolutely will. How about you, Adam? Where were you in 1985, or aren't you allowed to tell us?
No, I am old enough to remember Colin's era quite well, actually. I have a very good plastic surgeon here in Texas, so you can't tell. But I was there. I was there at the time when those episodes went out. I think I would have been... What year was Colin? Is he 84?
84.
So it'd have been 9 or 10, and I've got quite vivid memories of those stories, and vivid memories of what was happening at the time as well. Things like the hiatus, and I have a very clear memory of a kid coming up to me in the playground at school with a newspaper, showing me the thing saying, "Colin, Doctor Who's axed. What are you going to do?" You know, try. So yeah, I can remember a lot of that time. Yeah.
Yeah, in your face. Everything was in your face in the mid '80s. Whether it was the music, whether it was the clothes, and a lot of the attitudes too. I think we were encouraged to be quite in your face, and particularly the activities of the tabloids. It is well known that Colin's era was fraught with off-screen problems. The series itself, out of favour, I think is the polite way of putting it, at the BBC. The production team was in conflict too, and even the audience were initially at odds with this new, brasher and purposefully more alien incarnation of that central character, Charlotte. When did you first come across him? Was it just picking your way through stories?
Yeah, it was picking through stories. So I sort of started with Hartnell and then watched a story from each Doctor, and that's how I watch Classic at the moment. It's sort of piecemeal. And but I knew, just like you said, his era was so infamous. I knew that he had issues before I watched him, so I didn't watch him fresh. I can't say that I honestly knew a bit of the fan sort of reputation his Doctor had going in. So I remember thinking when I first watched it, I was like, but there's classic Doctors which I know some don't like. Like I quite like Sylvester. You have to get through some stuff, but I quite like Sylvester. So I was like,
you got to stick with him, haven't you?
I was like, I might like Colin because I like Sylvester, and I know his Doctor gets a bit of a bad rap. And sad to say, I really struggle with Colin's Doctor.
She's here anyway, everybody. You're here anyway.
Yes.
Well, maybe our enthusiasm. What do you think, Ian? Our enthusiasm could rub off on Charlotte if we keep going at her hard enough for the next couple of hours with this?
I think you might want to rephrase how you said that.
I know, but I was hoping that nobody would notice.
Yes.
We're going all out with a Colin Baker celebration this time for his birthday.
I think it's fair to say that, because it is definitely of its mid-80s, of its time, for somebody discovering the series, it might be a difficult thing. But there are so many brilliant moments, and I'm just going to name a few. So the scene in The Two Doctors, where he's talking about Nevermore a Butterfly. That's a beautiful long scene there. You've got Syl in Vengeance of Varos. That's a great creation by Nabil Shaban. other things. I mean, yes, the costume can be off-putting, but actually, what you get beyond that, you get used to it. Revelation of the Daleks. You've got some beautiful visuals in Revelation of the Daleks of him walking in the snow. Obviously, he's got that cape as well. That's beautiful. And I think Trial of the Time Lord, by the time he gets to Trial of the Time Lord, he's definitely found it. He knows what he's doing. He's a master or a doctor, should that be, actor. He really has. He knows what he's doing. And so does Nicola by that time, by the mysterious planet. They're not bickering. You know, they know what they're doing. And it's a shame that we lost that middle year with him.
Adam, I can in my view, how I look at it, whatever was going on around the show, and don't get me wrong, this is a celebration. We're not going to be hung up on the hiatus, on the coat, and all the contentious stuff. This is a celebration of the Colin Baker era for the most part. But for everything else that was going on, I'm going to slightly disagree with you there. I think that Colin I believe he always got it right. He pitched his performance. He knew exactly where he was going with it right from the get-go. I think, for example, his immediate predecessor, Peter Davison, who I always call my doctor, I think he was very instinctual, Adam, in how he played it. He kind of played it as himself, and whichever script he got in hand next, he sort of went at that, and it was another day at work, and he gave his best, simply because the kind of person he probably is. Whereas with Colin, I think Colin absolutely grabbed this by the scruff of the neck and used his imagination and all of his various layers, I suppose, that he developed over the 10, 12 years before. Here was somebody who knew. You can see on his face from the first episode of Twin Dilemma, he knew this was the part of a lifetime.
Yeah, I mean, I think Colin definitely grabbed this part with both hands, and maybe because he was a fan, wasn't he, of the show at the time, and he's famously said...
I don't know about a fan, but I think he'd always watched it, hadn't he?
Yeah, well, yeah, I think he'd always watched it, but also because he'd played Maxwell, he thought he would never be the Doctor, and so to actually get the chance to be him so soon after playing that part, I think he did grab it with both hands. But the thing is, I think with Colin, yes, I think he might have known where he was going with the part, but maybe the writers took a while to find his Doctor, because they did make some very bold choices, you know,
They did.
Particularly in the Twin Dilemma, which some of the choices they made in that, like him strangling Perry and stuff, I still find really bizarre that they didn't tone that down or work through that. But yeah, I think by the time we get to Child of Time Lord, I think the writers know his Doctor. But I think you're kind of both right. I think the writers needed to find his Doctor, but I think Colin kind of knew what he wanted to do with it.
So as I say, everything in the 80s was about getting your attention. And now we have your attention. Of course we do, over there in the live chat on YouTube and Facebook. I think we should go and check out some of the comments that we've got. Let's see what they've got to say. And their birthday greetings for Colin Baker too. Hope you're all well. Nice and sunny in Liverpool today.
Oh, nice.
Peter. I like it. And it's Richard Brooks says it's a lovely weekend in Dorset too. So we get the weather reports, weather and food. That's what we hear a lot on this show. Greetings from the land of dragons, druids, and lost shopping trolleys, says the Darren Zone. Good to have you back, Darren. Lost shopping trolleys. Makes it sound like he's on some sort of quest, doesn't it, to bring them all home. Good evening. Don't forget the Zyton 7. Advises Peter. That's good advice for any day of the week, isn't it, Adam?
What? The Zyton 7?
Yeah, those are the Zyton 7 crystals from Vengeance on Varos, I think.
Okay, right. Sorry, that went over my head.
Grab your crystals. Yeah, grab your crystals. Hello, says Dr. Alex. Good to see you, Alex. It's been a while. Good to see you pop up. We've got a book. We've got a recommendation here. Has everyone read Time's Champion? A much more fitting end to the 6th Doctor and then a tremendous buffeting. Okay, yes, so I haven't read Time's Champion. I think it's been out of print for a little while, but the co-author of it, Chris McKeon, he's been on the show several times. And so I'm surprised he hasn't turned it into an audio drama, Charlotte. He has everything else, haven't you, Chris?
He has got the ability to do it, but maybe it's just so much of a big task to do.
Was that one of the Virgin Adventures, Dan, or what is that book?
It was, I think that Time's Champion was intended to be a Virgin past, what were they called then? Missing
Past
Doctor...
Doctor's Adventures.
whichever they were at Virgin, those. But they lost their license around the time it was about to be published, and so this book that was written by Chris with the late Craig Hinton, it sort of fell in between the cracks in the pavement, and in the end, they ended up self-publishing it without the Doctor Who logo on the cover. Do you remember that, Ian?
I do. I know it very, very well, and I think you're absolutely right. It was around about the time when the license sadly disappeared, and Richard Brooks just saying that the passed away tragically young. Yes, Mr. Hinton was a fantastic writer, and I think I'm going to be very rude with what I'm about to say, but I think he coined the phrase "fan wank."
He did. Yeah,
Did he?
That's his lasting. Sorry,
Is that on
Craig. His lasting epitaph on his on his gravestone. Bless him. No, it's yeah, he was very aware of that as well. He had quite a right sense of humour, didn't he, Craig? I'm sure that Chris would agree. Yeah, hell of a contribution and a fantastic book. But it's only one of several imagined. Well, they're all imagined, aren't they? Apparently, Doctor Who's not real, Charlotte. That's something they keep telling me. But
What we're here for, then.
but that book was one of about 5 or 6 different alternative endings for the 6th Doctor. We may touch on some of that, of course. We may.
Interesting.
Tony L says, "Hi everyone, hope all is well. Happy birthday, Mr. Baker." Yay! And he's gone completely wild with the emojis there. Woodhouse 122's in too with
Woodhouse.
Evening All. Got Darren Bradley here and Kelly's here as well. Hello, sweetie. We've got a bit of a river song, yeah. Evening All says Simon Ashley. He adds that one. I think that's his customary greeting as well. And we've got Shah in the chat who says happy Type 40 day. Good to see. I think she's just finished work. She's probably commuting, rambling around the way that she's inclined to. Evening All, Raymond Williams, and Gary Browser says, I hope Dan has 60s coat on. Well, no, I don't, but I don't need to when I've got Ian Kubiak on the panel because he always goes the extra mile, doesn't he? It has to be said. You can't rely on him. What a salutations, says Aidan McGear. It's good. And diddly dum from Peter Harrington. Let's see who else is here. Vanessa Law, she's made it. Yes, she's
hello, Vanessa.
I gather she's completely recovered now, Charlotte. Vanessa. She's got a hello.
That's good.
Happy birthday, Colin. That's Crimply and Doubloon. Hail, everyone. Chips in Lord Thoth.
Lord Thoth.
We've got more emojis firing at us here. Lovely to see.
Wendy, I like it.
It looks a little South Park, doesn't it? She's got.
It's cool. You've done well with that.
Colin and the Technicolor Dreamcoat, says Shah. Is it the case, do you think, the coat still sort of overshadows the performance and the contribution, Ian? You know, Yoti's shaking his head. But no.
You can look beyond the coat. It's clothing. It's a costume. Yeah. You know, look beyond it. You know, the performance he gives, you know, like we were saying earlier, he knew exactly what he was doing from the off. He's an experienced, really talented actor, and he really, with what he's given, he gives it his all and then some.
I couldn't agree more. So far, my only real exposure to 60 is through Big Finish, adds Kelly. I love him in Big Finish.
He's so much better, Kelly, in there.
He's amazing.
That's the better way round, I would honestly say to people. Listen to the Big Finish and then watch some of his stuff.
Colin's Doctor almost had stopped me watching, says Vanessa, but I love the show too much and I came to like him. That was a very deliberate choice, wasn't it, Adam? It was a risky one, but it was very deliberate to put the audience on the back foot for a little while after the big brother figure of Peter Davison, I suppose, who we never really felt that he would purposefully lead us astray or into danger. There was Colin Baker playing it as an unknowable alien again, who was unpredictable and tetchy and all those other qualities.
There's a massive contrast between 5 and 6, and I struggled with that as a 9-10-year-old. It took me a while to really take to Colin's Doctor because he was so brash and dangerous and sort of almost sometimes uncaring towards the companion. And it didn't sit well with me as a kid. I'm going to be honest. It's only now that I've gone back and rewatched his era, and I kind of respect, them taking a different route and trying something different with Colin's Doctor, that I appreciate him much more now than I did as a kid. But I definitely back then was like really taken aback by it, and I wasn't sure about Colin's Doctor for quite a while. Really?
I know it sounds a little wanky, but you've got to. It's a second use of that word on the stream. I know it sounds a little wanky, but you've got to. I think you used to be an actor, didn't you, Ian? So respect the craft. It does sound a bit, but it is true, isn't it? And somebody, a consummate actor like Colin Baker, knew what he was doing. He felt because he'd got this role, he had no reason to believe that things wouldn't carry on business as usual. I can't blame him for thinking he had license to unpeel that character over a longer period of time.
Which is what he wanted to do. He's gone on record to say that, I think when he got it, he said that he wanted to beat Tom Baker's 7-year record.
Yeah.
And the thing is, okay, it's not on television, but his Big Finish range, is absolutely amazing. And all the other things he's done, he's just a really, really good actor, and just a lovely bloke.
No, I think honestly.
Sorry, I was just going to say I wanted to pick up on something where we said about the likable older brother version of the Fifth Doctor, and then this new version of the Sixth Doctor. But something like that has happened again in recent New Who.
Yeah.
When Matt Smith left and Peter Capaldi came, but you know what? That the brashness of Capaldi. You've got there's a lot of Sixth Doctor there going on, and I think that's why Peter Capaldi for me is my favourite of the new Doctors.
Yeah, and I think similar situation to sort of the Peter situation, that we were very lucky that we had somebody like Colin. Like I struggle, and I still don't really like his Doctor, but I will never knock Colin as an actor because every story I would watch and I'd struggle with the Doctor. I was always seeing Colin trying to give the best performance. You can never say he doesn't give 100%, 110%. And I think one of the moments that I can remember that really shows that is in the Two Doctors, where he finds Jamie when he's sort of half feral and he's been in the pipes.
Yeah, I was thinking of that as well.
And that moment that you suddenly see incredible care, an incredible almost worry, and you can almost get the sense of longing because he's got Jamie back. And you can see all of that within 2 minutes of Colin's performance of him finding Jamie. And then I could never knock Colin, but I just think for me, we've had arrogance. I think the way I try and phrase it to people is arrogance is part of the Doctor's personality. I'm not naive to say it's not there. It's definitely there. But for me, it was the combination of the arrogance with, at times, his treatment of Perry. I think for me, it was that combination of elements that just, I struggle, because for me, he's almost nasty at times to Perry. How, like, she can be in trouble in times, and he almost seems to just sort of go, you'll be fine. And it's like, no, she's in danger. You need to go and try and...
Because what she doesn't realise, because of his manner, he actually believes in her resourcefulness and her courage, I think. But she doesn't necessarily know that all the time because he's an alien. He can't quite get in the same groove of it. I actually think that the Sixth Doctor is all heart and all passion. And when things don't go the way that he plans, he plays the odds a lot, I think, Adam, and again in a way that the Fifth Doctor wouldn't do. And it doesn't always work out. He makes calculated risks sometimes with himself and with those around him. And when things don't go as he would like them to go, he's very hard on himself. I feel he breaks himself down.
There's definitely much more layers to Colin's Doctor in the TV show than I think is apparent on a first watch. I mean, that's why I've grown to like him more as I've grown older. And I think Big Finish has massively helped because he's absolutely made for audio, Colin, because he's just so bombastic and he just fills those speakers. He's brilliant on the Big Finish, and he's had some great stories, actually. I mean, the early run of Big Finish, they were on fire for a while. The early run, the first couple of years with Colin and that were just some cracking stories in there, and Colin was great in them. But yeah, there's many layers to Colin's Doctor, and I will agree with Charlotte. For a while, especially as a kid and then growing up, I wasn't fond of Colin's Doctor and his stories, but as I've watched them again over the years, I've realised it's not Colin's Doctor I don't like. I actually do like him. There is a lot going on there to like. but it's more the stories that I think I struggle with in his era. But you listen to him on Big Finish, and you look at his performance as the Doctor, and he's good, very good.
Yeah, Colin led the series for those two, as I say, 2 and a bit seasons back in the mid-80s. And now in 2023, well, he's just as much a fixture as a what would you call it? I get tired of using words like legend and icon. But they all are.
I would say personality, because like you said, he's been so visible on panels, on fan stuff. He's never shied away. So I would say personality.
And he's never afraid to speak his mind. That's what I like. If you get Colin on the panel, you know he will say what he thinks, you know, and I like that. I like the honesty of Colin.
He doesn't suffer fools gladly.
That's very true.
Well, I wonder, because I've probably seen Colin Baker interviewed more times than any of the other Doctors. I suspect because of his 40-year involvement with the show now. 40 years. This man was stood in front of thousands of people at a convention in America months before he began recording his first story. So his involvement with the fandom is probably more extensive than anybody else's. And yet, every time I see him interviewed, he seems to have something fresh to say, or he makes it somehow sound fresh. And Ian, this is a man who is celebrating his 80th birthday today. And everybody that I said, it's Colin Baker's 80 today, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Everybody I mentioned that to, Colin Baker, 80? No, everybody.
I was like that. I must admit, when I saw Colin was 80, I was thinking, no, surely not. It just sounds such a big round number, 80, doesn't it? You just don't think of your actors being that age. Yeah,
it does. And as I said, there's over 160 of his performances on Big Finish. They seem to just keep pumping, keep firing in the good stuff at him. And his performance in those, for example, I think you can tell that they're all a little older in their voices, but Colin's probably less than everybody else's. I don't know why that would be. Maybe he's never smoked. So that could be it. I don't know what it is. But whenever I listen to a Colin Baker audio, obviously the theme tune helps when you get the original theme from the Peter Howell or the Dominic Glynn one, come to think of it. They've both got the ability to transport you in time. But because Colin sounds so like he did back then, it all really evokes that time for me, a time when I was very, very young, very impressionable, and probably at the very height of my my fever for just more and more Doctor Who. And at the time, I'd had a VCR recorder for a few years, but it was during Colin Baker's era that the cassettes started to get far, far cheaper. And so this was the era where I could record them and keep them. I didn't have to sort of think, okay, which one do I want to keep? Which one will I be happy with an audio recording of? I could keep every Colin Baker story, and that's why I know his era sort of line for line, really. I think it was probably around this time in the summer of 1983 when Colin Baker was cast. At the age of 40, all fresh-faced, and as I said earlier on, very hungry for the role. They're pictures, we've been looking at these for 4 decades too, of Colin there. I think it was in the Blue Peter Garden, somewhere like that, certainly on BBC premises, with Nicola Bryant there, sort of holding her up on his shoulders. We've all seen these pictures, haven't we, over and over again. They're kind of iconic in themselves, really, and look how relaxed, look how self-assured he looks. He doesn't look like he's got any doubt in his abilities there whatsoever. They're both very, very fresh-faced, and it felt like the beginning of something. I was quite upset to see Peter Davison go. I was, because as I said, he was my Doctor. But looking at this guy, I thought, yeah, I could believe that this is Doctor Who right away.
I love those 80s publicity pictures where they used to take them to the park behind the BBC by that tree, and then they take them to the hotel over the road. You know, and Sylvester's got some, hasn't he, with Bonnie, where it's, you know, they're outside the TARDIS with home written on it, and I just love it. It's just such a part of that era. It's just great to see those pictures. It's part of it. It all looks so quaint now, doesn't it, Charlotte? When we look at sort of photo shoots and things now, which are usually always sort of augmented in Photoshop or something like that, that they would just take them out to a park somewhere.
It's so weird for me because a lot of the time in New Who's tradition, when you see a doctor, they're in costume. So it's always odd
Yeah.
to me to see the classic ones because they never did that. They were always in their own clothes. Like it looks like he's rocking a bit of like Johnny Travolta there, doesn't he, in that suit?
Yeah.
So it's just always, yeah, but even then you can just see the smile. That's what another thing I love about Colin. He's got one of the most welcoming and lovely smiles that he just invites you in the best sense.
He's got a glint in the eye as well, hasn't he, Colin?
Yeah.
Oh, a bit of cheekiness, definitely cheeky chappy, a little bit.
Yeah.
I think he has, and to quote the man himself, a vast beaming intelligence.
I'm looking as well. I can see a calculator watch on his wrist there. That's so cool. They should have kept that. They should definitely have kept that. It wasn't too long before we did get him in costume, of course, and this was the very first picture I ever saw of the Sixth Doctor in costume. It set the media, I suppose, alight. I think the first time I saw it was on the news on the BBC, but it was in the papers as well, in black and white, which probably was a way of lowering people in quite softly. But I think this image now, this takes me right back to being a 10-year-old boy and watching the new era, this brand new era, and this new Doctor begin.
There was sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, I mean, that I may have struggled with Colin's Doctor as a kid, but one of the things I did like, and I'm probably in the minority here, was the costume. As a 9-10-year-old, I loved it. I just thought he looked so vibrant and colourful. I was all for it, maybe because I liked, the Fourth Doctor and his colourful scarf. But yeah, as a kid, I liked the costume. And the thing is, for Colin, to put an actor in that costume, they've got to have the personality and performance to overcome it. And I think that's one of the things we can say about Colin is he does have it. He managed to, overcome that costume. I think. I know a lot of people have a problem with it, but his performance, I think he managed to. I don't even really think it's an issue when I watch those episodes. I don't look at it and think, "Oh God, that costume," because Colin's performance totally overcomes it. I think. But
I have to. I'm so glad you've said that because I've always liked it as well. I certainly never saw.
Oh, wow, that's good. I thought I was going to be the only one.
I think it could do. I mean, now of course I know we see the costuming has advanced considerably. I think perhaps more texture might have been, more grading of colour might have been more wise. But I just always got it. Even though I was very, very young, I got it. I got what they were going for. I understood his choices. I had every faith in the character and his suitability for the role. I don't know why. Maybe, like I say, maybe it was just the fact this was my favourite show. And just like a couple of people who said in the chat, it's Doctor Who. So of course I'm going to get behind it. It's Doctor Who.
I like the silhouette. I've always liked the silhouette. I think the coat as an actual coat is lovely. I've always loved a long coat in a doctor. I want my doctors in long coats. That's just a me thing. And I just think, honestly, if they would have kept that basic costume, but just gone with one main colour. We've all said in past streams, that blue version is lovely. And that just shows to me, it's not the actual cut and the costume as a physical being, it's the colours. If you just sort the colours out, and as somebody said there, you definitely get the Edwardian vibe. I quite like the top bit, which isn't the coat, and the neck thing and the trousers. I think that looks gorgeous. So I just think it was nearly there. It was just one bit that they really should have changed, and then it actually would have worked quite well, I think.
Well, in his first story, the Sixth Doctor mentions Beau Brummel, and that historical figure. I mean, if you see pictures of that nature of Beau Brummel, you see it was very much like that. The tails coming out of the coat, and usually a big old hat. And I think Colin had played a lot of period roles in the 1970s. He got sort of stuck in period drama, didn't he? Which I think he found quite frustrating for a while. He asked Anthony Hopkins for advice on it, I understand. We've got a comment here. This one comes for you, I think, Ian. I met Colin Baker at the Spearhead Live 2 convention in Wood Norton, where he appeared in his Sixth Doctor costume, and it was a thoroughly wonderful day.
Oh, thanks, Simon. It was thank you for coming along. Yeah, I did a Doctor Who convention last month back at Wood Norton, and I invited Colin Baker along, and I asked very, very nicely, would he be prepared to pose for photographs whilst wearing a Sixth Doctor costume, and he did, and he still got it. When I was helping him to get ready, and he was like, "Oh, really? Is it? God, do I not just look like a really old man?" I went, "You've still got it." And as he walked out to where we were taking the photos, everyone stopped and gave a massive applause as he walked out, because he's still got the bearing. He can still hold it, and he's still got that. He's still the Doctor.
That's
Absolutely.
lovely. Yeah.
One of my favourite pictures of Colin Baker was a shot of him in the back page of the Radio Times there with both coats sort of half on, half off, and as if he's stuck between incarnations.
Love that picture.
With a headline, "A Dream Come True" for Doctor Who. It was very relatable at the time. Like I say, I don't think he's ever called himself a fan as such, but he made no secret of the fact that he'd always watched it. I think he used to share a flat with David Troughton. He'd always known the Troughton family too, hadn't he? So
that's right. Yeah.
Again.
One of my favourite stories that Colin tells is that when he watched the very first episode of Doctor Who, he went around someone's house and leant in the doorway. And he said he realised that half an hour later he was still in the doorway because he'd just got transfixed by it. And I love that. I love that story.
It was actually his house. It was actually the house he was sharing with David at the time. And he walked in, and he was still there, 24 and a half minutes later. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
And eventually got to play the role and to bring us his unique take on what was by that point. It had just celebrated its 20th anniversary. Well, no, when he was cast, the Five Doctors hadn't been screened, had it? But it was very much sort of on the fandom's radar. I think he was cast not long after the Longleat event too. So Doctor Who was probably as big at that time as it was ever going to get. In fact, it was probably the biggest internationally than it had been in the entirety of the classic run. He inherited all of that and didn't seem remotely intimidated by it. I mean, for me, this was an extension of everything that had led up to this point. And in some ways, Charlotte, it was and they did say this, that it was a kind of back to basics. There was a lot of talk about how Hartnell's Doctor was also unknowable and alien and tetchy, and that they wanted to touch that again. And there was a certain amount of resistance to that when we're talking about a character that hadn't been on screen for 17 years. So there was a little bit of resistance. But there was the other aspects to his character were just a really neat flip to what Davison had done, to what Tom had done so successfully for most of his tenure, certainly when he was dialed in. And he was, I think he was the first of the Doctors to actively try and reach for this and reach for that and create an ultimate Doctor, I suppose.
Yeah, you can definitely tell relatability was not something they wanted with this Doctor. That they had that with Davidson, they had that with Tom. Even though Tom had his eccentricness, he still was relatable in a way. You could sort of picture knowing Tom's Doctor, and you can definitely see they wanted that mystery. I think there's been that ongoing theme. I don't know if it's ever got confirmed, this idea of a regeneration gone wrong, almost. I think that's the sort of a fan idea that I think we've had a lot because of Colin's Doctor now, because his was the first Doctor we actually saw the trauma side of a regeneration. And actually if you think about it, rewriting your whole body, you probably should have a few issues afterwards. You should have some damage from that. And other Doctors, it didn't really come across, whereas with Colin, they actually actively tried that with the stories. And I think whenever the production team wants to do something different with the stories, you should always applaud that, because it's not the safest option at times. But they did it. And I think like I said, now we've got that idea of this regeneration gone wrong, and possibly that's maybe what we're doing now with David Tennant's Doctor. We will have to see.
Speaking of right now, we've got him. He's awake. It's our resident real-life time traveller. Awake, present and correct, and back on Type 40 Live. Matt Potts joining us from Tasmania here.
Hello, and not a moment too soon. Hello,
Matt.
Hello, mate. You're just in time. We're celebrating Colin Baker's 80th birthday here on Type 40 Live. When did you first see the Sixth Doctor? Can you remember first coming across him? Because obviously,
I can.
In your territory, it was wall to wall John Pertwee episodes for years, wasn't it? So when did you first get Colin Baker?
He was at the end of Peter Davison's run, so we got that one episode. What was it, Twin Dilemma? And I absolutely hated him, and then that was it. It disappeared, and I was like, "Where's
from the schedules? You mean?
You started it, yeah, from the schedules." And I didn't get to see it till 1992. So at about 2:00 in the morning. So apparently it was broadcast, but during Christmas period, in the mid 80s, just to get rid of them for some reason. So on a Sunday. So it was. I missed out on that, and because we got Sylvester in about 1987, and I was like, "Where's Colin? We've skipped Colin," you know. So I never got to see it till 1992. So, but once I did, you know, and I'd seen the rest of Colin. It was I really warmed to him, you know. Yeah. I was kind of sad to see him go, you know, and I actually took the time out to probably about 12 years now to actually go and meet him. I flew to Melbourne to meet him because you know I do like his Doctor, and I do see him as a Doctor. I remember there was a little bit of I did hear some mumblings that he wasn't very popular, but I can't remember where I heard that or whatever, because this would have been in the mid 80s, so you know, before the internet. And you know, it was really nice. I mean, he touched me, so I was like, you know, when I finally got to meet him, I was like, wow, you know, he just gave me this huge hug. And he was like, come here, you know, for a photo on that. And I was like, wow, that's really, you know, he's a really nice guy, you know. I really felt comfortable around him, you know, when I finally met him. So, you know, it was, it was a slow trek, but you got.
It was a slow trek, but you got there in the end, is what you're saying.
I thought he deserved better, you know. Yes, yeah. Very much.
We've got a comment here from Lawrence Steele who says, whether you like it or not, I like it. Happy birthday, Colin. We've got lots of comments like that. We've got lots of happy birthdays, lots of referrals for great audio shows. Sadako 24 says nothing wrong with enjoying a good fan wank. Thanks for that one. You can look beyond the coat, says Gary Browse. Of course you can. Of course you can.
Yeah.
Richard Brooks says the coat doesn't stop the Doctor being there. So authoritative. The Doctor, indeed. He just doesn't care about how people feel and wants to flaunt his presence. He could speak a lot without thinking too, and he was painfully honest, where perhaps other Doctors would spare people's feelings if they could. I say he challenged those who were in his company, I think, Matt.
Yeah, he was very abrupt. And that was one of the things I didn't like about him. But the strange thing is that we'd only just gotten Peter. We were a little bit behind, as we are, and we were a little bit behind in the Whodom, and we actually got the 5 Doctors before, like around the same time you guys did. So we hadn't really gotten Peter. You know, so we were a bit lost, sort of thing, and I remember there was a hoo-ha with it, and we had magazines and stuff, and in Australia, which was surprising. You know, little pull-outs and stuff like that in the magazines, and they'd show the famous one with Tom Baker's wax model and all this. And I remember reading it, and I was like, they had a picture of the new Doctor Who's been cast, and it was like a picture of Colin, and I'm like, but one just got Peter Davison. What the hell's going on here? You know,
so confusing.
I kind of felt a bit, because I was warming up to Peter Davison, and by that time, and I was like, who's this fella? You know, why are we getting him already? You know, and so yeah, I didn't. I think I was probably too young enough to understand that, you know, it was a bit of time travel sort of thing. But yeah, I once he showed up, and I was surprised he showed up during Peter Davison's run. I was like, you know, what the hell, you know?
poor Matt, he was confused then, and he sounds like he is a little now. I thought he was
But I
great
love
as
him now.
Commander. I thought he was great as Commander Maxill as Mark Milford there. Yes, so Colin originally played Commander Maxill in Arc of Infinity opposite Peter Davison. Got to gun him down there with a Staser, another convention story that he tells a lot with great relish, I think. But yeah, this was the thing, because he'd always watched the show, always harboured a bit of a desire to play the part, said to his agent when the offer came through to being Doctor Who, he clearly wanted to take it, wanted the work in, but his feeling was that it was a bit of a shame because they'd never cast an actor to play the Doctor before who'd been in it previously at that point, had they? But of course, they did. They cast him eventually. I wouldn't say it set a precedent, but there have been others that have followed too. And I suppose
Capaldi, for example. See,
yeah,
it's exactly the same. It's every sixth time they get it right.
Absolutely. We've got a comment here from Simon Ashley who says, I totally agree with you, Ian. Definitely Colin has still got it, a larger than life character. See, this is it. I like how Colin's Doctor, Peter Davison, he talks again, I keep talking about Davison, but because he always describes it as the fact that when he got the role, he did the same things that everybody else had done. He just ran a little bit faster. And that's, and they talk about the running quite a lot, don't they? Peter Davison, David Tennant, people like that. And that's true. But Colin's Doctor, where they would sort of run here and there, I always felt that Colin's Doctor was sort of charging to various places. He seemed so heroic to me when I was a kid. He was always full of heart. And for me, that made up for all the bluster and that veneer of arrogance that the character had sort of got. Peter Arrington says, so bright. I remember them in the 80s. I had the odd Hawaiian shirt, a nice yellow and black with African motif, and I loved it. You and JNT both there. Good morning, Matt. We've got people greeting you here. We have Darren Bradley with, at this point in Doctor Who history, and at this point in Doctor Who history, and every growing popularity in. Oh, he means ever. And the ever-growing popularity in overseas conventions, I'm amazed the BBC weren't pushing more money into the production. A classic case of the BBC never understanding what they had. I didn't understand.
I've always got the impression from people working at that time when they talk that the BBC almost forgot the show was still on air. They just left them in a cupboard and were like, oh, we're still giving these people money to make a show. That amazes me. And maybe it's because
it had got its slot, Charlotte, got its slot, got its budget, it had got its audience, and they were never really interested in sort of putting anything into it, into upscaling it, I suppose we would now describe it.
Yeah, just maybe it was just BBC was so just at the time they had the things they liked and they wanted to focus on, and everything else got back to the wayside. I don't know. But I just find that amazing whenever I hear, like I said, production staff talk at these conventions.
I feel you're
right. Of course,
there was. When they found it, they kind of wanted to send it to Goodwill. You know.
Yeah, they were like,
"Oh, we don't want this," you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've only got to look at the TARDIS prop to see how they just didn't put any money into it. Just using that same prop for years and just putting the odd new screw in it, to keep the door
I love
hanging
that prop.
on. Oh, well, so do I. But it looks like it's going to fall down most of the time.
The Colin Baker era on television is just 7, 11. It depends how you count the Trial of a Time Lord. Where do you sit with all of that, Matt? Do you consider Trial 4 stories or one long story?
I saw that. I wasn't like you guys. I didn't see it week by week.
Of course.
Because I didn't get to see it until the early 90s, and at 2:00 in the morning, they actually showed a lot of it together. So, it was. I never really missed a beat with it. So it was like I watched all of them, all Colin Baker's run all at night, and it was fantastic. You know, I was upset because they didn't continue on to Sylvester McCoy's. They just stopped at Colin Baker's run on the reruns, because it was hard. Eventually, Doctor Who just disappeared. You know, after around 89. So, you know, I was glad to get any Doctor Who, and plus it was new Doctor Who, even though it was 5 years old, you know.
But that didn't matter. It was new to you, Matt. That's the main.
Yeah, that's what I'm
thing.
saying. It was new to me because I hadn't seen it because I'd skipped to Sylvester's. But once I saw it, you know, and I saw him actually perform the Doctor and his take, so to speak, and I saw that his entirety. And I mean, even Trial of a Time Lord was a bit of a dream to watch, because I remember the tapes came out here and I couldn't afford the tapes. I didn't have a job or anything like that. And there was that beautiful box set, the Trial of the Time Lord, with the TARDIS 10 box set. And I remember eyeing it off for the longest time. And, you know, and I was just like, oh, this is Hidden Who, you know, and I really wish I could afford to watch it. But, you know, eventually it did show, and there's him and Liz Sladen. That's awesome.
Yeah, this is one of my very favourite pictures from the entire history of Doctor Who, Adam. Colin Baker with Elizabeth Sladen there, picking their way through Doctor Who: A Celebration by Peter Haining. I suppose this must have been about 84, 85. The idea of the guy new to the role, sort of doing a bit of on-the-fly research there, and with a friend at his side. I think this says so much about Doctor Who. The fact that they're two of the actors from the show is kind of by the by, because I think we've probably each been that person dipping in to Doctor Who history, whether it be in a book or whether it be online or whatever. And look at the smile on Colin's face.
I was just going to say, I've never seen that picture before, Dan, and that is such a beautiful picture. Like, and I was just about to say, what you take from that is the grin on Colin's face. You know, just looking into the history of the show there and thinking, I'm part of that. You know, and probably Elizabeth as well. That's such a lovely picture.
Yeah, but even Elizabeth, and that's what we love about Elizabeth. She always had that air of like the motherly figure, like the helping figure, and you can see that there. She sort of got that air completely with Colin.
So is that from a convention? Do we know where that picture's from? Or?
It was from a convention, yes, which explains why he's festooned with lots of badges. They were given him
and
by various attendees there. Yeah.
Do you know, I always loved the cat badge, Dan. Even, you know, we talk about the costume in it. As a kid and now, I always loved the cat badge, and the fact it changes now and again as well.
Again, you could say that that's trying a little. You could say the celery was trying too hard, but you could see they were trying to think of various motifs, and maybe one or two of them would stick. But of all of the things that they tried with Colin's Doctor, I think the cat suits him the very most. I think his persona and Colin's delivery of lines almost seems cat-like sometimes, Ian. Do you know what I'm saying? He's got that grin.
The cat that walks alone.
That's it, yeah.
I believe the phrase is
all places and times the same to him. From
a Rudyard Kipling quote, isn't it? Yeah.
Was the cat badge Colin's idea, Ian?
It was.
It was.
Yeah. Because he again, Colin did an appearance on Blue Peter in costume, and he explains his love of cats. And he explains that why he chose about the cat badge, and he took on the Blue Peter cat at that time was notorious for not sitting still with anyone, but it sat still for the Doctor.
It's one of my favourite clips. That was, and I've always got the impression that Colin was quite a literate man. I think he probably reads quite a lot, generally speaking. Ian, he's nodding his head.
Yeah, he's a highly intelligent and well-read man. His love of the English language, and he's a champion of the English language. Really? At my event a few weeks ago, the last thing he said was how to say the letter H correctly. And I probably did that wrong, actually, but there we go.
Have you incurred the wrath?
Well, doesn't he?
Have you incurred the wrath of the Sixth Doctor then, Ian? Is that what you're trying to tell us?
No. What it was, it's his love of the English language. And there's a big Finnish story, and I'm trying to remember the title, but it's all about the lexicon of the English language. Somebody in the chat, if you know what it's called, please, because it's going to bug me. But that again, because he has a love of English language, and he loves coming up with different words, and just because it's a passion of his.
Yeah.
And he writes a lot as well, doesn't he? He writes for his local newspaper. And
He
he's written
doesn't
a couple
anymore.
of books.
He doesn't
does he
anymore.
not?
Actually, no.
Oh.
The story goes was that they had a change of editor, and they Ish. Thank you.
Ish, yes.
Doubloon. Yes, Ish.
Crimpling doubloon, yeah.
It's a celebration of the British language in audio form. Colin is just so in his element there. Absolutely. But yeah, he has a love of language. He loves it.
He has this almost Shakespearean, doesn't he? Whenever Colin
Yes.
speaks, you just
Yeah.
picture him on a stage. He could be talking about anything. And you just think, no, he should be on a stage telling me this because his voice has just got that quality.
I have seen everything he's ever done in the theatre since 1996, 97. And just absolutely amazing in everything he's done. The one thing I think where he was just amazing, he was Inspector Morse in the theatre.
Didn't know that.
And absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. And most recently, and I'm sure you guys spoke about this on the show, playing Sherlock Holmes. He's doing a performed reading, which is going back on tour next year.
With Terry Malloy and Dee Sadler, that's the one, isn't
correct,
it?
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Hound of the
Fabulous
Baskervilles,
stuff.
yeah.
So yeah, there they are, back in the mid-80s, around the time of the 20th anniversary. And yeah, I was going to say, it seems like a long time ago, because I'm sorry to say, Colin, it was, mate, it was. And of course, we are celebrating this year the 60th anniversary of Doctor Who. All the incarnations and everything that's been before and everything that's set to come in the all-new era. We've got those 3 specials later this year and a whole series to come afterwards too. We're watching and commenting on the entire Whoniverse here on Type 40 Live and bringing it to you in this form here with a live chat on the weekly. As well as that, you can catch our podcast across all major podcatchers there. So lots of previews, reviews, interviews, geek outs and deep dives across all major podcatchers with ourselves, some regular panelists that you'll know from this show and some pretty awesome guests, all for the love of Doctor Who. I know that Colin would approve of that. Okay, where to next? Let's go a little bit further back in time, shall we? Let's go. Where are we? There it is.
Hello, I'm the Doctor.
Hello, I'm the Doctor.
No, you're not.
Yes, I am.
No, you are not.
I am the Doctor.
I'm a good Doctor.
I'm a bad Doctor.
Yeah. Anyway.
Happy
Happy
birthday.
birthday, Doctor Who. That's you.
Happy 80th birthday, Colin Baker, the sixth Doctor Who. We're going to take a look back at Colin's life just for a little now. His pre-Doctor Who life. Now, Colin was born in Waterloo in London, but his family moved up to Rochdale in Greater Manchester when he was just 3 years of age.
Oh, wow.
And you can imagine, I know, just 3, all that distance. His father was very proper, as I understand, and they took him to be educated in an all-boys school. So this was St Bede's College in Manchester, and during that time, it was an all-boys school, but they used to do a lot of Gilbert O'Sullivan productions. So obviously, because it was an all-boys school, some of the boys had to play the female parts, and because of I think Colin's range, shall we say, singing voice, he would often play some of the female leads, as I understand it. But it gave him a bug for acting that he just couldn't shake. Now, after a flirtation, I suppose, with the legal profession at the insistence of his father, Colin eventually went and enrolled at the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art when he was 23. Sort of seized the day, didn't he, and decided that his life was better spent doing what he wanted to do, Ian, rather than what his father wanted to do. I think a lot of us can relate to that, can't they?
Absolutely. Just to pick up on what you were saying there, what happened was him and his mother used to watch a lot of amateur dramatics, and he turned around to his mother and said, "Oh, I'd like to do that." And then the gentleman either in front of them or behind them said, "Oh, would you? Well, I happen to be the president of blah 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 local amateur dramatic society. We meet on this day and that day, and then that's where he got the bug.
It's a story we hear quite a lot from actors, isn't it? Because obviously their loved ones often want to shield them from such a foolhardy profession, Adam, because it's notoriously choppy, isn't it? A lot of actors say they spend more time out of work than in.
That's right. Yes, I always wanted to be an actor. There's something about it, isn't it? But yes, and I mean, with a tash like that in the picture, you've got it.
At least he got a fag on the go as well, so he was a smoker. See, you learn something new. You learn something new every day, don't you? So yeah, he went to what they call Lambda, and once he graduated, he started to turn up in various TV productions, popular dramas, and classics opposite the likes of Sir Anthony Hopkins, who I mentioned earlier on, and Helen Mirren. So apparently it was Anthony Hopkins did give him sort of advice, because at this point he was doing a lot of period dramas and he felt he was stuck in a lot of the same sorts of roles. And so I suppose Anthony Hopkins at the time would have only been a few years older. But yeah, it's that, I suppose in that profession, when somebody is more experienced, it's a mentor role. It's understandable when they start to pass down little nuggets like that, isn't it? Because they would have each have been in similar situations, I suppose.
Who's that he's fighting with in that picture, Dan? It looks like Ted Bovis from Heidi High.
That is Sir Anthony Hopkins, believe it or not.
No, is it?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
No, and that's what's lovely about acting. You can tell it's a proper brotherhood in the sense that they share and they help each other.
I mean, I get the impression that they probably do compete for some of the same roles. So it's, when people get the role that you want it, and it's like, oh my God, he's got it. Harrison Ford's got that one again. I can imagine a lot of that does go on.
Definitely. Oh yeah, it's a very competitive industry. Like we were saying just a few minutes ago. A lot of actors are out of work. I think the old saying was that at any given time, 95% of actors are out of work, 4% are working, and 1% are in auditions, something like that.
Yeah. It wasn't long before Colin Baker got the first role that sort of changed his life as Paul Merony in The Brothers. This was a very popular drama on the BBC in the mid-70s, wasn't it? It was, I suppose you could say, it was a British take on Dallas and Dynasty. It was all sort of hijinks in boardrooms and bedrooms, wasn't it? Yeah. Well, this is the kind of show that we hear about quite a lot, Adam, mostly in anecdotes from Colin Baker now. But for anybody who was, I suppose in their 30s and 40s, raising a family and watching the telly around that time, this was a major, major show and a big deal, wasn't it?
I've heard Colin talk about The Brothers a lot. I've never seen it. I've never seen a single episode. Is this the one with Louise Jameson, or am I getting confused with something else?
No, it was the girl that played the Rani. She was in it, wasn't
that's
she?
it. Yeah, Kate O'Mara.
Kate O'Mara.
I knew someone else is in it. Well done, Matt. Yeah, but I've never seen it. Yeah. Does it exist? Like, is it one of those that's been wiped, or does it exist?
I'm pretty certain it exists in full, Ian.
Yes, it does. Yes, and this was the series that sort of made him a household name. He was voted the most hated man in Britain by a certain red top newspaper, if you could call it a newspaper. And he travelled the world on it. It was huge in Israel. They had a huge screening about it. Even Vickers used to change the time of evening song, just so that people could go and watch The Brothers. It was that popular. And he was on his way to something. One day he tells this story. I'm sure everybody who's ever met Colin has heard this story. That somebody came up to him and said, "Hey, aren't you that Paul Merony?" And he went, "Yes, I am." And he was on his way to an award ceremony. He gets punched and his tooth comes out.
Really?
Oh, I didn't know he'd lost a tooth. I remember hearing him tell the story of how a fist literally just came straight through his open car window and just connected before he even had a chance to flinch or process what the guy was saying to him.
Yep.
Wow.
So I'm guessing he was as ruthless as JR then.
That was the likening to it. He was the sort of JR, a British version of JR. Yeah.
as I understand it, was about a family business that had gone public, and I think he was a solicitor, a stuffed suit, who was appointed to look after the interests of shareholders and to give the family a hard time.
Yep.
I've never seen it, so I couldn't tell you. If there's anybody who remembers the brothers, please let us know in the live chat. It's one of those I'd like to get on DVD. It was produced by Gerard.
They are available on DVD.
So I see they're quite expensive when I last looked into it. It was produced by Gerard Glaister, who later went on to produce Howard's Way, didn't he? So it's along similar lines, which also had Kate Omar in it, of course. For sci-fi fans, after that, he appeared in Blake 7 as Babe and the Butcher in a 1980 episode, again, standout episode of Blake 7.
Brilliant.
And I think this is certainly, I remember watching this. I never realised at the time I was watching Colin Baker or a future Doctor Who or anything like that. But to say it is a scenery-chewing performance is putting it mildly, isn't it, Adam?
Oh God, because I love Blake 7, and I love this episode so much. I mean, Colin, he's really going over the top with it, but it totally works. Like when he sits down and has that conversation with Villa, talking about his mother calling him Babe, and it's a brilliant performance, but it's so over the top. But then it just works in the context of that episode. I think he's brilliant in it.
He was in that episode, I think, although the character is bombastic, Matt, it wasn't a signifier of what he would do with Doctor Who. But I think what it does perfectly frame is how he always seemed to believe in whoever he was playing. And every time I've seen Colin play anybody, and I've seen him play some really larger than life characters in things like Jonathan Creek and things like that, he always seems completely invested and connected, not just with the character, but with the flavour of the show. I mean, Blake 7 was a pretty outlandish show, wasn't it? And they whacked him in what I think it wasn't leather, was it? It looks like PVC. So
PVC
with studs and things like that, and they give him an earring. This isn't subtle.
The future, Dan.
This isn't subtle, is it, Matt? And it's probably not what he'd imagined he'd be doing, particularly after a few years in a very nicely tailored suit in The Brothers. But it couldn't have put him off science fiction at all. Because
I'm one of the few that's never actually watched Blake 7, so.
Matt, me as well. You're fine.
Oh, good. Oh, Charlotte, we need to do a watch along, I think.
Yeah, well, definitely.
You definitely should. The bit with the gun at
to
the
put
end,
that
Dan,
right.
is amazing.
Just
when Colin's got the big gun.
Yeah.
See, when I see performances like Babe and the Butcher, even though it is so radically different, I can see in that why JNT would have spent time with him and probably researched all the other things he'd done, as well as the time playing Maxwell, and seeing the Doctor in that simply because of Colin's range and his larger than life manner. I think that comes across in whatever he does as well. I wouldn't say he's not naturalistic, I think is the word. I think he is heroic and perfect. I
sort of see Colin as you could tell he was at the forefront of Doctor Who. He was the main character, and whereas in recent times they've sort of become in the foreground and just part of just a show. You could tell he was the head of the show, whether or not it was because of the fact that he had a big bright coloured coat and, he was a little bit bombastic in that. He ran the show. He was the Doctor,
Yeah, he was sort of like the centre of gravity, wasn't he? And everything just went around him.
Yep.
What I respect about him is that even when his reign was interrupted for that 18-month period of time that we call the hiatus from around the February, wasn't it, of 85, he always kept his dignity, always kept smiling, always believed in the show, maintained a dialogue with the fan base, and you would never see. I missed it The 18 months seemed like a lifetime to me as a dedicated Doctor Who fan at the time. But I had never had any doubt that it was going to be coming back, because Colin Baker, I wouldn't say he was constantly in the newspapers, but in fact during that time I know that he suffered a terrible personal loss, but he was still at conventions. He was still in Doctor Who magazine saying, yeah, it's coming back. There was a very clear commitment on his part to remain with the show. And yet, some would have maybe detached themselves from it just for the sake of self-preservation, Charlotte.
Oh yeah, especially with all the issues like we've sort of touched upon, and we could probably do a whole stream about all the issues. So yeah, it's amazing that he's
Strength
like,
of character.
This is my role, this is my character. And it just shows, and I think there's something about this role that it seems to, for the majority of the people who are casting it, they seem to be very protective of it, and I love that. And they seem to be very dedicated to it. Seems to just be a trait that all the Doctors have.
I think also Colin actually he took it on as his own, and even though he wasn't the Doctor anymore, he didn't just go walk off and go, leave me alone. Even Tom Baker did that, But Colin Baker, he never ever went, look, I don't want to talk about that show anymore or anything like that. He was still doing like conventions, and I think he was also doing fates and all that sort of thing, opening up fates and everything as I suppose as a paid actor, you've got to take jobs where you can, but I don't think he was ever ashamed the fact that whatever happened during his tenure, that he didn't want to ever talk about it, and I have so much respect for that.
He is one of Doctor Who's greatest ambassadors for the show. He loves it. He celebrates it. Not just him. I know individuals who appear regularly or semi-regularly on this show have their own ideas and about Jodie Whittaker, but he was all for Jodie Whittaker. He was all for he was all for Jodie. He was all for Peter Capaldi. He celebrates everyone coming into it, and he celebrates the show, and that's what makes him a really good ambassador for the show.
He places his faith and with an open mind. I would never fault anybody. Would never fault anybody for that. And Colin accepted the post of honorary president of DWAS in 2011, just after the death of Nicholas Courtney, who'd been the previous president. Which to me, that says a lot. I mean, if somebody gets into any profession at all, be it I don't know, flower arranging or the police or acting, you don't think you're going to have to take on these sort of really quite arbitrary roles. But again, Colin took this with good grace, and as I understand it, he regularly appears at DWAS-related conventions and fundraisers. He's very much dialed in to all of that. I've always felt, Ian, as somebody who stages conventions and knows the man, that he just gets us and gets all of it.
Yeah, it's a party, and it's a party for everyone there. I love the picture you've just put up. That was him in costume a few weeks ago at the start of May. And like I said earlier, he still has it. He loved the day because what we did is something completely different. What you were just doing, Dan, we looked back at his career and we were watching a load of clips and he was commenting on it. And he was like, I don't even remember doing that. Where did you get this? Where did you get that? So, and I've sent him all those clips. So, it was a chance for him to relive his whole career. And we touched upon a little tiny bit of Doctor Who and something which I think is possibly his greatest ever role. And I think he has said that that's the greatest job he ever did. And that was the Five-ish Doctors reboot.
Oh yeah,
he was so good in that.
He was the best.
So good.
He was the best in it. His comedy timing, the way he sends himself up. There's no acting. That is Colin Baker. It is brilliant.
It is delightfully self-deprecating, isn't it?
Yeah.
How he plays on the idea of an actor's ego, Charlotte.
Oh yeah, because his doctor was arrogant, so in that he dials into that and times it by 10. And like that's what I loved about the Five-ish Doctors. You could see it was this lovely combination of them playing themselves, but playing the traits their doctors were known for. That sort of mixed in. It was such a lovely little mix. And I can remember the panels he would do afterwards in relation to it, and how he would like have a little dig at Tom Baker. And like nobody else would do that, but he was like, well, some people didn't want to be in it. And you know exactly who he was talking about. And it was just, I agree, the comedy. They were all so funny, but he was definitely one of the highlights for the comedy in that special.
Yeah, people have mentioned in the live chat how it's a pity that Colin Baker has never led a sitcom, Matt, because of that comic timing.
I did like the fact that he liked to rub it in a bit that he was a doctor. I just, I mean, anybody would give their eye teeth to be the doctor, and I think that's pretty much a highlight for his career, and you can really tell. He does say that it's the biggest role of his career and an absolute highlight. And I mean, you
look
can't
at his filmography. He's got a list of credits as long as your arm on all the series that you would expect. Three appearances just in Doctors alone, Adam, as well as Casualty and The Bill and Jonathan Creek and Sunburn and all these other shows. Stretching right the way back. Juliet Bravo was another one. Huge show. There was Colin Baker in it.
He didn't last long in Jonathan Creek, and that was the only other time I saw Colin Baker. Like I think he was a murder victim. But,
he was the first ever murder victim in Jonathan Creek.
Oh, there you go.
And that's it was just great to see him on screen again. So
he has got a fantastically dry sense of humour, Colin, as a person. I mean, like Ian said, he's game for a laugh. He's not afraid to send himself up, but he's also got that honesty in his humour that comes through as well. That's why he's always so entertaining on stage, I think.
Definitely.
Happy 80th birthday, Colin Baker. We're celebrating the life and the career of the Sixth Doctor himself, Colin Baker, here on Type 40 Live this time. Yet please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the cloister bell if you haven't already, so you get all the notifications about what we're doing next and when we're doing it. I know exactly what we're doing now, everybody, because it is that time. Now, maybe the carrot juice has gone.
It's not quite carrot juice.
Through.
Not quite.
Well, if it's gone right through you, then you may be happy that this is the point where you can go and sort yourself out in the smallest room in your TARDIS, while the rest of us, we feast on the wondrous Type 40 Live ad break. We'll see you back here again in a couple of minutes.
Lock off and hold. What did we do before motorways? Get very tired and take forever. Rain to all units. Coffee and a bit of a stretch, fellows, or do we push on?
Left one here, sir. Slight age will go to sleep. Could modest bit of exercise. Right one here. I'd like to second that.
Mouth falling. A little on the dry side. Wouldn't say no to coffee.
Nice to brain. Might like a bit of a change of view.
Right. Keep going. Brain to all units. We shall be stopping.
Nice to brain. Motorway looking a little clubby ahead.
Brain to hands, stand by. Brain to eyes, check rear mirror.
Clear. Rear mirror clear.
Brain to hands, indicator, and move into overtaking lane. Over now.
Nice to brain. Road clear ahead.
Looks like a pull-out. Brain to right, foot, stand by to cover brake.
Nice to brain. Pull out started.
It's underestimating the speed of sports.
Nice to brain. Sports car staying put.
Exactly what I'd do if I was him. Teach that Sunday driver a lesson. Well, motorway's no place to teach lessons. The sports might have to pull out.
No indicators yet.
He's going to have to.
Still no indicators.
Brain to right foot, be ready.
Sports pulling out.
Idiot. Range of eyes, jick speed, 80 into right foot, and brake, and brake, and brake. Marvellous, isn't it? First that Burke pulls out without making sure there's any space. Then the goon in the sports car slams over into our lane and not a signal in sight.
That could have been very nasty.
For us all. And it was...
Yes, welcome back, everybody. Here we are again, back in Type 40 Live's console room for our celebration. Happy 80th birthday to Colin Baker, the 6th Doctor. Has any of you ever seen that before? That's a bit of TV history.
No, never seen that before.
It was a public information film, obviously about the dangers of driving when you're not paying attention and awake and all that kind of thing. So there was Colin Baker with another couple of Doctor Who graduates. Let's go and check in the live chat and see
Is that a real photo, Dan, or is that being photoshopped?
We'll talk about that another time. Let's take a look in the live chat and see what people have got to say about all of that. Crimpling to Bloom says, looks like the summer of 1976 by those parched fields. He's so thin. Colin Baker is a very skinny young man with a tash. It is Colin Baker in the middle, and yeah, people have spotted him. Of course they have. So yeah, two Doctor Who graduates were also in that. We got Christopher Owen, who appeared in Meglos, as well as John Challis, who was obviously in the Seeds of Doom and better known as Boise in Only Fools and Horses. See, I love seeing all of these things. There they were flanking Colin Baker in that wonderful slice of 1970s TV history. In fact, I think it's the kind of thing it probably would have been shown in cinemas as well. A lot of those things weren't they? You get those.
You wouldn't get them saying that bird has just pulled out now, though, would you?
Well, they may not.
No.
I do. Yes, you can spot all these old actors in these various things. It's, for me, Charlotte, it's part of the joy of being a bit of a nostalgist.
Well, and it also just shows how well they cast in the classic, and how even the smaller parts had these very storied actors that would do lots of work after and before.
Yeah. And did anybody? I think people did spot them in the live chat. People got it. Yes. And Crimpling Doubloon recognised Christopher Owen too, and lots of people obviously recognised Boise. Meglos actor, says Darren Bradley. Meglos maybe, says Peter Harrington. Lots of people spotted that. Mark Milford says, congratulations, Colin, on being 60 years old and still working. Yeah, he's still very active, isn't he? Again, conventions and acting roles too. I think the last thing I saw him in, or was aware that he'd been in, was Emmerdale a couple of years ago. He took a romantic lead part in that as well. Are you aware of that, Ian? I think he swept one. Didn't he sweep the landlady off her feet or something?
He tried to, but it didn't go quite his way. It was only one episode, and it was very funny, very entertaining in that. I think the character had a love of jigsaw puzzles, if I remember correctly.
Oh, I see. See, I haven't watched it in many, many years, but I did like seeing him in it. Yeah, sometimes he's bearded, sometimes he's not, but he can always rock it. I've got a comment here from Gregory Jones who said, Colin really looked after me at a memorabilia event when I was his chaperone. He made sure I had plenty of food and drink, and made sure I was looked after too in the green room. A lovely man. And there's been several comments like that in the live chat too. Various anecdotes from conventions. And again, I suppose everybody has their off days when because the cameras are on and eyes are on them at these events, Ian. As you say, some don't suffer fools gladly. I can believe that. And to be fair, why should they?
Absolutely. But I've known Colin. I first met him in the early 90s, and I've never seen him have a off word about anyone, be off with anyone, even though he may be annoyed or frustrated with things going on around him, but he always makes time for the individual.
Makes time for the fans, from what I hear. Yeah, this is Type 40 Live, your live stream magazine format Doctor Who show, clocking all the fixed and not so fixed points in the Whoniverse, both on and off screen, and none are more fixed than the birthdays of our legends themselves. In this case, it's the 6th Doctor, Colin Baker. Of course, I'm Dan Hadley, Birmingham's King of the Geeks. I'm here with Charlotte Shields, Ian Kubiak from Cygnus Alpha Events. We've got Adam from the Geeks Handbag and Matt Pott there too. And we're getting stuck into your comments now and your memories of Colin's career, your favourite stories, all of that jazz. And keep them coming there in the live chat. Who else? What else is here? Let's have a look. What's going on? Secrets of a Wallaby boy.
Wallaby boy.
Wallaby boy. Starring Colin Baker.
Yeah, you got to speak Australian.
So is this a new production? Is this something new in the filmography that I don't know about?
I've never heard of it.
I think, is it not? He's doing a voice for it. I believe. I may be wrong.
There is a show called Koala Boy or something like that. So maybe that's
Koala Boy and Wallaby Boy. Yeah, Colin Baker's relationship with the Doctor Who fan base, as I said earlier, it stretches back 40 years in itself. There can't be many Doctor Who fans who haven't got, well, a picture a little bit like this in their album of Colin making time for his fans, for his audience, whether they're maybe the slightly older studenty types or some of the younger ones. Colin Baker's there.
Look at those hairdos.
I'm just thinking the guy on the right looks a bit like a young Michael Knight.
Yes.
It's the leather jacket, isn't it?
Yeah, he's got the jacket.
or he's a gripper from Grange Hill, in which case Colin's a very brave guy. He tax your dinner money there, Colin, if you don't watch him. So I love all these old pictures. And as I say, I think Colin has probably done more conventions than anybody else. You met him as well then, Matt, and you say you travelled to the mainland to meet him.
Whereas with Ian, I think Ian has a slightly larger ones, but I have that sounded a bit funny. But like a slightly larger convention. I went to an intimate one. I went to one that was probably maximum 50 people, and so I got to actually be a little bit more intimate with him, I guess, in his setting, and I felt so comfortable around him, And like I said, he put his arms around me and said, come here. Whereas I felt when I've met previous doctors, I'd met Peter Davison and that there was a slight distance there. But with Colin, I just fell in love with him straight away, And I was just like, can you write on the autograph, I am the Doctor, And so I just I got a real sense of love from him. So, I have just the utmost, no matter what he says, which can be a little bit odd sometimes, I have just so much respect for him as an actor as well, And like you said, you pointed out, Dan, he'd been in Jonathan Creek, which was probably the next thing I saw him after Doctor Who. So it was awesome to see him in those sort of things, in those roles where he didn't have much range, but he had gravitas, as Simon likes to say, and I always have just utter respect for Colin.
We've got a comment here from Darren Bradley in the live chat, which reminds me of something that I saw him in a while ago. And I think it was one of the first examples of something which we now call meta, Adam, which was deliberately sort of playing off an association with another show, in this case Doctor Who, when Colin Baker appeared in Casualty. And Darren reminds us he played an alien character, and they gave his eyes a mysteriously sort of green glow. That sounds unlikely in Casualty, but wasn't the conceit, the idea was that this man was in Casualty, was in the A&E department, but he genuinely believed that he was an alien being.
Yes, I'd forgotten all about that episode, but actually Darren's comment has just brought it straight back to my memory. I do remember that. The green eye, the eyes glowing,
there's also when he actually walks into Casualty before what the reveal is on that episode. What actually happens is that the Casualty receptionist, their computer is going fuzzy, and he takes something out of his pocket, which looks a bit like a sonic screwdriver, puts it next to the monitor, and it all comes right. So again, that part was specifically written as a homage to Doctor Who, which Colin played.
Isn't that great? I don't remember that bit, Ian, but that's brilliant.
Yeah.
I'd love to see it, actually. I wonder if the episode's out there anywhere we could watch it. I'd love to see
It's
it.
probably on YouTube somewhere.
Must be. Everything's on YouTube.
The Sixth Doctor is cool and funny. Talking about meta, got the Meta Whovian here too, who adds that one. It's good to see you. Matthew Pounder says everything. Yeah. Well, I once met Colin when he was switching on our town's Christmas lights, said Sam. I got a VHS signed. Fella in front of me asked him to sign Tom Baker's book.
Oh, no.
Colin signed it and asked him what he thought of it. Class move. Class move from 60. The fans, we affectionately call him 60, don't we? You know, it's one of those that sort of stuck. I don't know whether Colin coined that expression or not, Adam, but
he did actually. He started to refer to himself as Old 60.
Yeah, the first time I heard him say that was on the Big Finish, but I think he did coin it. Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
he did, yeah.
Old 60, he says. So that's what I always quote him as on Twitter. It's Old 60.
And talking about fan interactions, here's some pictures that you supplied there, Ian. This was at your recent event a few short weeks ago, wasn't it?
It was, yes, where Colin, unlike other doctors, doesn't like to, and I think we can all understand possibly why he doesn't like to dress up in costume anymore. But I asked very nicely, and he posed for photos in a Sixth Doctor costume, and he was lovely. He was absolutely lovely. And there we are. We are looking back at various things from his career, and he really enjoyed reminiscing, a bit like what we're doing this evening. In fact, I think some of the people in the chat and watching now were there. So please comment if you enjoyed, watching Colin Baker watch himself. So that was very meta and very weird.
That's a great picture of the two of you there, Ian, looking at each other like that.
Yeah, no, it was a lovely day.
That's a nice moment that's been captured there.
Yeah.
Mega the Extremist says he calls himself Old 60, and it's stuck.
Yeah.
And Lee Wood says it was a great day at Spearhead too. And Ian, you look splendid in your coat.
I nicked it off someone. but we did have actually going back to, we were talking about the costume earlier. We had 2 original screen used whole Sixth Doctor costumes.
2?
Yeah. 2 of the 3. There were 3 originally made, and we had 2 on display. One which was from the original his first season, and one that was made for the Trial of the Time Lord.
Wow. Extra large.
When it comes to obviously to screen use costumes, they have several, don't they? Because obviously they're going to get torn, they're going to get worn, they're going to get dirty. If they're shooting scenes, a hero one. If they're if they're getting wet or adverse weather
thinking
conditions.
of the bit in Trial of a Time Lord where he's going under the sand. That scene.
Yes.
Oh. Yeah, it must have been well.
Again,
really
that's done fantastically well. But that's also a fantastic director, Chris Clough. Chris Clough, an amazing director.
Yes, he is.
Big fan of his too. Now we've also got a contribution from you too, Adam. You met Colin Baker yourself, didn't you? But I gather you've met him a few times. But I'm thinking specifically of this one way back in the day. You've got into the paper, didn't you? This was your local paper.
I'm so proud of this. I've kept this newspaper clip with me for so long because it meant so much. I was 9 years old, and he was doing a local signing. He used to live very close to where my parents lived, and he's just doing it in this tiny little hall. And I got an autograph and a photo with him, and he was the first Doctor I'd met. So to meet him at this age, to meet the Doctor, the current Doctor, was just magical. And I think I always think that I was captured in the newspaper because I was probably the one holding up the queue for so long, which is not something I do now, because I remember asking him lots of questions. One of the ones that I know that I asked him was, is K9 coming back? I remember I was obsessed with K9 at that age. And yeah, so I think while I was there holding the queue up, the newspaper captured it. And I had that newspaper clipping for years. And so quick story here. I'd made a coat. I'd made myself a coat like Colin's Doctor out of God knows what. And I remember telling him that I'd made this coat, and he said to me, "Brent, that's amazing. Send me some pictures." Now, this wouldn't happen nowadays, but he gave me his home address because he was local. And I remember my mum taking some pictures of me in Colin's coat and sending him the photos. And a couple of weeks later, I got a lovely letter back, official BBC, paper with the TARDIS logo at the top and BBC Wood Lane from Colin. This lovely long letter thanking me for sending in the photos. Now, the newspaper clipping and the letter from Colin, my mum said, we better put them in a safe place. After I'd shown all my friends at school and everything who didn't care, they went in a safe place. We never saw them again. We don't know what happened to them. They got lost, and I was mortified. But my nan, bless her, who's no longer with us, had kept a copy of the newspaper. And so I've still now got the newspaper clip, thanks to my nan, who'd kept it in a drawer, which she gave me about 10 years after I'd lost my original copy. So thanks to my nan, I've got that. But
she gave you the drawer?
Yeah, she gave me her cabinet drawer cabinet.
Sam in the live chat on YouTube says, you can tell it's you, Adam.
Well, maybe a little more hair, but yes. Yeah.
It says here, it's not every day you come face to face with your favourite TV star, but 9-year-old Adam Charlton and other tame children got the chance on Saturday when Colin Baker, alias Doctor Who, turned up for a coffee morning at the town's Masonic Hall. Hundreds of youngsters queued for the actor's autograph and took the opportunity to be photographed with him. It's lovely. Yeah,
it was amazing. Such a good day. Yeah, I remember it so clearly, even though it's so long ago. It was a magical moment, a magical day. I just wish I had the letter. Like, I would love to know what happened to that letter, but it went in a safe drawer and never got seen again.
I first met Colin in 1990/91 in Chicago at a convention with McCoy. They were both brilliant. Those were the days. You could just have a chat with the guests as you passed them in the hallway. That's also from Mega the Extremist on YouTube. Times have changed quite a lot, haven't they? It's obviously commercially conventions are just sort of different now. A lot of people bemoan this, but in my view, from the things that I've experienced, a lot of it is a simple fact of reality, Ian. Particularly, I'm not just talking about things like health and safety and the fact that everybody's got a camera on them now and all those kinds of things, but it's the nature of the industry, I suppose. You're somebody who stages conventions. Some of these things are just a fact of reality, aren't they?
Yeah, I think it is an industry. Conventions, big Comic Cons, smaller, intimate events like I do and others do like that. It's a way of being able to meet those actors that you admire.
Yeah. We've got,
and I would say to actually, to go to an intimate event rather than a big, massive convention, because it's just so much nicer. Everybody's calmer and relaxed, and it's just, except for the people running it, Ian. But other than that, I really, if you get the chance to do one of those rather than a massive big convention. Of course, you're not going to do that with any new doctors.
You never know.
Oh, I don't know. I've been to those, and Capaldi's. Oh my God, there was no chance of me meeting him at all. He was the number one, and that was a big, massive convention.
Looking at the Sixth Doctor's stories, actually the TV stuff or the audio stuff, but particularly the TV stuff. Do you have a favourite story? You're not the biggest Sixth Doctor fan, Charlotte. You mentioned that, but have you got a favourite story of the ones that you have seen? Which one does stand out?
See, I do struggle. Actually, no. I'm trying to think. The Cyberman one with the returning character. Which one is it?
Attack of the Cybermen by Paul
Yes,
and
when he
Moore.
gets converted.
Yeah, with Maurice Colborne back as Lytton in that one, yeah.
Yes, that one. Because I think actually that they got the right amount of sort of horror, because it's Cybermen. The sort of the harsher tone suited it. And I think actually because of you could actually see Colin's Doctor be really upset that he'd actually lost that character and that he did get converted. You could sort of see the horror on his face. So yeah, that one I think is the one that comes to mind.
It's quite a complex story, not just in the fact that it's quite laden with continuity, that one, Ian. I think depending on who you talk to, some people dislike it because of all the continuity. Other people think that really adds to it. And this obviously was the start of season 22, which again, it was very in your face, wasn't it? I don't like using words like violent, because I'm not sure that it was, but it was uncompromising, and it was perhaps graphic is the right word. But when you're digging deep into a character, as I think was the intention with this, maybe that line, as the decades were, this was 10 years on from like the Deadly Assassin and all the furore surrounding that. Attack of the Cybermen, that was the one that did register with the censors, wasn't it? And with Mary Whitehouse again, that got them at odds with him.
But society had moved on enormously in that period, hadn't it?
Obviously, we talk a lot about audience sophistication with the passage of time on this show, and we look back on these stories, and it's very easy to come across them now on physical media or when they're streaming, and to watch them in isolation. But none of these things were created in a vacuum, in a bubble, were they? There was things going on around them culturally and in the news, just as there are now. And there was pressures and there was fashions as regards storytelling, because as always, Doctor Who was fighting for the attention of the viewers with usually what ITV had sort of scheduled directly opposite. And in this instance, in the mid-80s, they'd really gone in on imported American shows, hadn't they? And I'm not saying that that's why they made the choices that they made, but I think it could be why they decided to, certainly increase the runtime of the average episode to sort of compete in that level, but to push those boundaries a little more. And maybe they come out of it, maybe they lost out of the deal in the long run. But again, as a child watching it, to me, it was just Doctor Who. It was the next evolution from what I'd seen a year earlier in Warriors of the Deep with the sync operator. That was quite graphic as well.
I think I might be a bit more squeamish than you, Dan, because I remember a bit as a kid not really liking the tone of some of the Colin Baker episodes. And Attack of the Cybermen sticks in my mind because in my mind's eye, as Mary Whitehouse would say, because I think they did push it just a little far. I think some of it was a bit gratuitous. So, there's the bit where the guy's got the knife of the guy's throat over the sand quarry, which is goes on a bit too long, I think. There's the hand crushing, which is, pretty quick, to be fair. It's worse in my memory than when I actually watch it back. But there's also shots of like a gun shooting a Cyberman in the face. Like, it's so close up. To me, it's a bit gratuitous. So I feel like they were trying to push the boundaries, but perhaps they pushed it a little bit too far, I think, for the time.
I remember seeing him that was at the two doctors where he smothered the guy with the
shock
guy. And I just remember being horrified that he'd smothered him. And I was just like, I don't know about you, but like I just felt that wasn't a very Doctor thing to do, But even though Tom Baker had done it before where, he'd actually killed someone's oxygen off and stuff like that, I just, it just seemed out of place, I guess, is how you could say it. So, I just remember being horrified by that particular image, of him literally snuffing that guy's life out.
Yeah.
Even though he was a horrible person.
We've got a comment here from Sadako24 in the live chat on YouTube who says the 80s was a very violent time for cinema that people often forget. Matthew Pounder says that for him, speaking objectively, the violence did get too much. So this is, and Sodor Engines too, the scene with the Cybermen crushing Glitton's hands
that was my issue. I remember I was like that, Matthew, thinking, God, like, I remember the two doctors, some of the stuff with the whole eating people aspect.
Eating a rat. I remember.
Yeah, it's like that that felt a little bit too harsh. And for me, like I said, that's why I picked Tack, because it actually suited for once the villain, which is Cybermen. It suited the theme, whereas in other ones, yeah, I agree with Colin. It was a bit. It almost felt like instead of writing a good story, they just wanted to do shock. And you should always do the story first.
Well, there were themes to the two Doctors, for example, but obviously, yeah, a lot of it was pretty graphic. How about you, Ian? Have you got a favourite story from the Colin Baker era?
On television or audio?
Yeah, or audio if you wish.
Television. I like them all. I really do. I like the Sixth Doctor era, but if you had to make me choose, and this is going to be very controversial, but I have a very soft spot for the last 2 episodes of Trial of the Time Lord.
I thought you were going to say Twin Dilemma there, Ian, when you said
no. Let's be serious. Let's be serious.
It seemed like you wanted a disclaimer out there right away. So that's the story that we know as the ultimate foe. And talking about problematic, that was the ultimate problem, wasn't it? The original plot was sort of had to be binned after Robert Holmes he died, didn't he? And they couldn't use his original script. So the ultimate foe was written in like 48 hours, I think, by Pip and Jane Baker.
Something like that. But as it appears on screen, you've got fantastic locations. You've got the Gladstone Pottery Museums. You've got that sequence and scene that you're just putting up on the screen there now is fantastic. You know, Chris Clough is really in his element as the director here. Colin is really in his element, especially, and the previous story as well, the Vervoid story. You know, Colin is really there, you know, with having Bonnie Langford as Mel as well as the companion. You know, it's a different dynamic. It's a more sort of caring doctor companion dynamic, which we're a bit more used to of seeing in previous years. And he's enjoying it, and he's having an adventure. Doctor Who is having an adventure in those episodes. But in the last 2 episodes, there's just something magical about it. And also the night shots at the Gladstone Pottery Museums. You've got Geoffrey Hughes as Mr. Popperwick. You've got Tony Selby as Sabalom Glitz. You've got the Valliard, Michael Jaston. It's just all lovely, and just it
had gone, Ian, from if we talk about the previous season having been quite graphic. This still had some big concepts. This was more unnerving, I think. There was something of the Sapphire and Steel about the Ultimate Foe.
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah, definitely.
The scene with the hands reaching out of the quicksand it's the stuff of nightmares. And you see this now in adventure fiction quite a lot. The idea of quicksand, that's as old as time. It's very King Solomon's Mines. I used to have nightmares about quicksand when I was a kid.
And just talking very briefly, quickly.
I have to say, there wasn't much quicksand in Cradle Heath in the 1980s. I avoided that fate.
You'd have quick cement, perhaps. But there is the one sequence in those episodes where he's in the trial room and he delivers this wonderful, elegant speech about the Time Lords being the oldest civilization, decadent, degenerate, and rotten to the core. You know, just watch that sequence, and there you see an actor at the top of his game, the Doctor being the most outraged and passionate. That's what you get from him, passion.
Well, in the 21st century, we're used to articles, aren't we? Countdowns and on YouTube as well of what is your favourite Ultimate Doctor Who speech, and it's usually something that Pete Capaldi or Matt Smith has said, and there's a kind of belief out there that all of that started with the new season, because obviously we get the swelling, dramatic Murray Gold music during a lot of that, don't we, Adam? But the classic series, and particularly Colin's Doctor, had a nice line in speeches and drama, didn't he, like that, just as Ian's described it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great speech Ian's talking about. It's the one where he's talking about mad conspirators. That one.
Mad conspirators.
Mad conspirators, yeah. And it's funny because I can sort of hear the music in the background as well. I mean, some of the music in Colin's era isn't as good. There's the bit in the Sidemen that do-dum, down, which kind of gets on my wick. But putting that aside, there is some nice stuff. Actually, the Twin Dilemma has some lovely music in it. You know, I mean, might not be the best story, but there's some lovely pieces in that.
I agree. Mega the Extremist is a big fan of season 22, the best season of the 80s in his eyes. Violence should punctuate a good story. It shouldn't be overdone, advises Sadako24.
Yeah, the funny thing is, Dan, although I didn't like the violence as a kid, it just shows how times have changed, because a lot of the stuff that's in it, you know, kids would probably love now. You know, our society's changed, but back then it was, it's a bit much for me. But nowadays they'd probably lap it up. They'd be like, "How many killings in it?"
And the scene with Shockeye as well. Cannibalism has no place in the family show, says Matthew Pound. Yeah, it did sort of shock me when I was a kid. Have you got a favourite Colin Baker story there, Matt? Which one would you plump for out of the 7/11 that were made for the screen, or any audios that you've heard that you'd like to shout about?
I really like Vengeance on Varos. It was Big Brother before, you know, there was a Big Brother, and it was just something new. You know, it sort of told a future story that actually happened to come true, you know, although probably less death, but you know, and plus we had Syl, a new character that returned, and later
probably
on,
the most memorable villain of the 1980s, with the exception of maybe Michael Jaston. I don't know. I think I'd probably give it to Nabil still. I come to think of it.
I'd say that was Colin's villain. You know, I don't think that Syl would have worked with any other, because you know, they were formidable. You know, and so I'd say that one. Even though, you know, watching Jason Connery, you know, shirtless and all that sort of stuff.
Something for the ladies.
You know,
something for the ladies.
I think that's something that,
one for the mums for a change rather than the dads.
Wanted.
We need something now and again. Come on.
Well, I think John Nathan Turner just wanted that one. So,
with hindsight, I think there's something of the Black Mirror about Vengeance on Varos, just as you said, Matt. It's very prescient, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it's so bleak. You know, and yes, it's an alien planet and everything like that, but, you know, it was just, to me, it was an adventure, even though it was very claustrophobic as well. It was an adventure, and, you know, he just, that photo is actually the photo I got him to sign, because, you know, I just, to me, that was the point where he was like, you know, he is the Doctor. To me, there's always a point with every single Doctor that, you know, I find, yes, that's the Doctor. And that was the point. That was the point where it turned for me. That I
think that Vengeance, I know it was still quite early in his tenure. I think this was probably his best all-round performance, where he was playing the Doctor on all levels. Again, it's a great script, but Colin, shows his maybe the Doctor isn't a part that best showcases an actor's range, Charlotte, but within the context of a story, if you got the humour, you get the adventure, you get the sort of the righteousness that's in there too. And you get the tenderness, the fact that he's desperate to save Perry in that. And for all the fact that they're at each other's throats sometimes in those stories, his devotion to her is never more palpable than then, I think. Yeah. And also his the way that he resolves the story as well, if you've seen that one.
Yeah, because I'm going to have to go in a couple of minutes. I'll just say, I think the best Doctor Who stories are the ones that try and show the Doctor in every light they can. They try and give the Doctor every different thing that they can do, possibly. So I'm going to have to go. I've been told to come away. So thank you. And happy birthday, Colin. And we all love you. And may you carry on being in the fandom, being in conventions, and maybe appearing on the show again. Wouldn't that be nice? So good night, everybody, and I'll see you all next week.
Good night, Charlotte.
Take care, Char. Take care.
When she said being on the show, I thought she meant get him on this show.
You never know.
Colin, if you're out there, mate.
You never know. It could be arranged.
have a
It could
word
be a
with
ring.
him.
Wouldn't
that'd
it
be
wouldn't it
lovely.
fun? Well, let's face it, the man, he made it out of the time lash, okay? So
Oh, God.
an hour or so in the company of us here on Type 40, I'm sure we'd make short work of it. I'm sure we'd be absolutely fine. Thanks as always to Charlotte Shields there in the live chat. We've got a comment here singing the praises. I believe that every Doctor Who story is somebody's favourite, Adam. You know, and we've got people in here raving about like Good Fun, Varos there, another fan of Varos, Matt. Mark of the Rani
I
is
saw
probably
there, yeah.
Sam's favourite. Earlier on, I saw a comment.
It's actually the one I was tilting towards, but I like.
Oh,
Benji.
you railed at the last minute, and somebody was even standing up for the Twin Dilemma, which is probably the one which gets the biggest slating, always at the bottom of polls. I've got such a soft spot for it, but Crimpling Doubloon loves
It's
it
a
too.
Smurf, isn't it?
He says, I love the Twin Dilemma. There are many faults, but many excellent qualities too. The foremost by far being Colin's performance. There was no doubt he was the Doctor. But how about you, Adam? Which is your pick of the on-screen or audio performances of Colin Baker?
I do like Mark of the Rani. I think it's a good one because I just love Kay Amara as the Rani. I think she's just brilliant. Too. So it's interesting to see her and Anthony Ainley together. But I'm going to plump for Revelation of the Daleks, and it's one that I've grown to like a lot over the years rather than at the time, if you like. It's grown on me. Just because I feel like it's a dark, very dark comedy, and I do like this interesting thing of Davros controlling things from a basement and being like this, you know, a bit like Big Brother. And I just think there's many great visuals in it, you know, that I will never forget as a kid, the guy who's transforming into a Dalek and he's talking to his daughter. That has stuck with me forever. Dalek, visual, it's horrifying. But I think it's a good story. On audio, though, he's done some great stuff. I mean, Jubilee is a brilliant Big Finish audio, and I think I'm right in saying that went on to be Dalek.
That's right.
The Robert Holmes story. But the Jubilee, the audio with Colin, I remember thinking was great. He did one called The One Doctor, which is really good fun. And I'm trying to think of the name of it. Maybe Ian knows. Quite early in the Big Finish range with Frobisher, the Doctor and Frobisher together. The first story. It's brilliant. I haven't listened to it for ages.
The Holy Terror by Robert Brock Sherman.
Terror. Yes, The Holy Terror. I remember really liking that. I mean, we said it earlier. Colin is just superb on audio. He really gets it, and he sounds very natural. Like some people, you know, their voices are changed and that, and also their delivery changes. They don't suit the audio range. Colin is so natural on audio.
One of the other, because he just doesn't have a weak Big Finish story, but I urge everyone, if you want to just listen to one, if you've never listened to a Big Finish story, why haven't you, for a start? Arrangements for War.
Oh,
yeah, that's quite an old one as well, isn't it? I think I've got that.
I don't really
and Maggie Stables. They land on a planet. It's a very sort of just an adventure, but there's no monsters. It's a bit of a political one, but the ending. All I'm going to say, if you want to see an actor, or hear an actor rather, at the top of his game, Arrangements for War.
Definitely check that out. I may have listened to it, but I don't remember it. Yeah.
The Sodor Engines is also a fan of Revelation of the Daleks. It's one of my favourites, but it was also my first exposure to classic Doctor Who. Wow. Alexi is a laugh. Yeah, Alexi Sale in that huge name at the time. Now somewhat forgotten, isn't he, Alexi Sale?
Oh, no, he's still got a huge career on Radio 4. He has a regular show. What was it? His sandwich shop or something like that. I can't quite remember.
Okay.
But he's still a very, very sort of political comedian type thing. But on that note, I'm going to have to be going shortly, Dan, I'm afraid.
That's quite all right, mate. Thanks for joining us for this one. I know that you've got, obviously, I was aware that Colin was at your event, and thanks for providing those pictures too, and a little bit of insight there of working with the icon himself. And have you got any last message for Colin on his 80th birthday? I'm sure he'll be watching.
Happy birthday, Colin.
Hey.
Thanks again, as always, Ian. Hope to have you back at some point in the near future, sooner rather than later. But
yes,
all the best.
Take care, everybody. See you all soon. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Mate,
Bye
take
for now.
care. Bye. We have here from Matthew Pounder. there's Graham Harper, and then there are other directors.
Graham Harper is a good director, it has to be said.
He is,
sure.
yeah. When it comes to Terry Malloy as Davros, obviously he played the part opposite Peter Davison, Sylvester McCoy, and Colin Baker. And he probably has. Actually, no, he has less screen time opposite Sylvester, doesn't he? But in this one, I felt that Davros seems to be a perfect opponent, particularly for the Sixth Doctor. And I suppose particularly Terry Malloy's performance, Adam, because he does take it up. You know, he doesn't whisper quite as much as Michael Wisher did. He takes it up, and so he matches Colin's bombastic, dramatic, courageous and brash Doctor, doesn't he?
Now, I think Terry Malloy is fantastic as Davros. I rate him very highly. I mean, Michael Wisher, I think, will always be the definitive, but Terry Malloy is fantastic. I mean, particularly, although it's a Fifth Doctor story in, is it Revelation? No, this is Revelation. What's
Revelation,
the Fifth
Doctor? Yeah.
Resurrection, yeah. There are scenes in that. I mean, considering he's got this mask on, there's the bit where they first unfreeze him, and he just is uncomfortable. And I'm thinking, how is he acting through that mask? Like, I totally get that he's just portraying that Davros is uncertain and he's looking out and there's no movement. And I think Terry Malloy really gets the character of Davros. I did hear him recently say that he was talking about Journey's End, you know, the 10th Doctor story, saying that he was invited back to be Davros, or he was considered to go, but he didn't. I don't know whether he didn't get it or he didn't want to do it, but he wasn't speaking. He's basically said he dodged a bullet, which I was surprised about. He said, you know, I wouldn't have wanted to be in, having now seen it. I'm glad I didn't, you know, do it. And I thought, oh wow, but basically because I think he didn't think they respected the character Davros. I think that's what he was getting at. So I think he gets the character Davros, and he is great in Revelation. I do love the twist that when you think he's been killed and the head deflates, that it was all a ruse and Davros is in the room. I remember thinking that was brilliant at the time. And he's a good foe to the Doctor in it, just like you said. And it's just so calculating and scheming, the way he's just sat there watching everything on the screen going on and manipulating people. It's a good story for Davros, I think, that one.
It's one of the reasons why I enjoyed their rematch on audio so much as well. I think if there really is an embarrassment of riches when it comes to Colin Baker on audio, but I think if I was to choose one, it would probably be the Davros one that put him there with. This was 2003, I think this came out, but I've re-listened to this over and over again. Wendy Padbury and Bernard Horsfall, they're in it as well. So I think that's got a certain kind of magic about it, and they get much more time together. I understand that Colin and Terry Malloy are good friends in real life. They're working together, or have been working together this year, haven't they, as we said earlier on. I think if I was to choose a favourite Sixth Doctor story from the television, though, it would probably be The Mark of the Rani. It's
a good one.
Adore it, though. Everything about it, really. The fact that it's a mixture of location, shot on film, and the standard three-wall sets of the BBC, Matt. Everything's there. You've got Kate O'Mara as this brand new villain, again, being just as arch as Colin Baker. Again, they were old friends. They probably knew exactly how one another was going to
They have a chemistry, don't they, Dan?
They really do.
You can tell that they're old foes. They know each other, you know?
Yeah.
I was just going to say, Dan, the fact that she is a new villain as well, she seems so rounded and confident in that role that it always, does this make sense? It always surprises me that this is her first story. In my head, I'm always thinking, no, was the Rani in it before this? And I'm like, no, she wasn't. This is the first Rani story, and you just instantly get her character. And maybe you're right, Matt. Maybe the chemistry was there between Kate and Colin already from the brothers, and maybe that's why they're so good together on screen.
Helps. I think it really helps, but I hate to say it, for all the brickbats they get, Pip and Jane Baker, they may not have been the most sophisticated of storytellers, but they had a good grasp of character,
and they were reliable. That's what JNT says. He could rely on Pip and Jane Baker. I'll always stand up, defend them to the end of the earth. Despite some of the stories they came up with, they had a lot of ideas, and when they were thrown and given like 24 hours to save the show, they did it. So I've got a lot of time for Pip and Jane Baker, and I love seeing them in interviews, don't you, Dan? That you really get this sense of this couple that are from a certain time period. They remind me of like somebody that I would have known as a kid, like grandparents or something.
Yeah, your aunt and uncle, people who live 3 doors down.
They're your aunt and uncle that you called aunt and uncle, but weren't your aunt and uncle, aren't they? They're that type of character.
Exactly.
And I love seeing them together in interviews. I think they're very much of their time, and we don't get people like that anymore.
I saw a movie that they'd written called Night of the Big Heat.
Oh,
and it was very, very. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but
don't know it.
It's very. Oh, you got to check it. Peter Cushing.
I think I've seen a film called Night of the Big Heat, but it's certainly. I don't think it was written by them. There wasn't much of a script.
No, well, it was.
Yes, so in my view, Pip and Jane Baker, their writing style. Adam's going to need a minute. Their writing style and how
terrible, Dan.
Because they liked. Yeah, sure. I was saying that the other day. I'm not sure what any of you are getting at really. In my view, Pip and Jane Baker, they're well known for being as writers for quite verbose, Colin, and being quite literate and using these big words and things like that. Colin Baker, as Ian was saying earlier on, a very, very literate, well-read man, keen on his grammar, and he gets to have fun with words here. Pip and Jane have fun with words, so does Colin Baker, and so that's why I think you get such a full story there with the Mark of the Rani. Mega the Extremist agrees with me. Davros is a brilliant story, one of the best Big Finish releases. Mark Lewis says, wasn't Revelation the first time we had a flying Dalek? Well, we had a flying Davros, which is as near as damn it, isn't it? The special effect. Davros, it's a bit primitive, so I was never sure whether he was actually flying or not when I was a kid. I think they've sort of fixed it a little bit in the DVD release, Matt, when they tidy up the special effects sometimes.
I never liked Daleks flying. I thought that was stupid for the longest time.
Go old school.
Night of the Big Heat is a science fiction movie, by the way. Just putting it out there. Okay. You got to watch it. It's aliens. It's great. It's fantastic. You don't know where it's going.
Sadako,
coming.
I'm not saying a word. Sadako24 says, Colin has always said Davros is his favourite audio. I had no idea about that. Cybermat Strikes says, I love all of Colin Baker's stories, even Time Lash. I've got a soft spot for that too. As I say, this was my era. I know all of those stories. Inside out. Simon Horton's in the chat. Where is he? We've got a comment from Simon. Where is he?
Hi, Simon.
Sorry I couldn't make it tonight, everybody. Looking forward to watching the full show back. He's going to do some time traveling later on, and I know what Simon's going to do. He's definitely going to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and he's almost certainly have hit the cloister bell before now. So, follow suit.
He had common sense. He wouldn't subscribe. Yeah. I'm joking. I love Simon. He's awesome.
What else have we got? But it's been there's still some coming. More Rani fans in the chat. The Rani is awesome, says Dr. Alex, and sadly underused and a missed opportunity. The Rani and the Doctor old school friends, says Richard Brooks. They have a long past. She is amoral, and that's a great area for an actor to explore. That's the difference, isn't it? She's amoral, whereas the Master was immoral, and they have fun as writers playing between all three of those. Yeah, wonderful story.
She plays off the Master amazingly as well. Like, you got two villains against the Doctor, and they're both time lords and a time lady. But they just play off so well. That whole story. That's why I was saying it was hard to pick, because Mark of the Rani is probably my second favorite.
No, not to go off on a tangent, but do either of you feel like Missy would have been better as the Rani? Do you think that was a missed opportunity?
Oh, without a doubt. And this is nothing against Michelle Gomez. She was fine in the role. But even now, can you honestly say that all these years on that you think of her as the Master? It's a different character entirely.
I think she.
She just goes around calling herself Missy, doesn't she? So she's
a biochemist. When we meet Missy, she's a biochemist, just like the Rani is. Ridiculous. I've never understood that.
I think that's been switched.
Time Lord 2023 says, I met Colin Baker. He's a great guy.
Yeah,
and we have a hail here from George of Australia.
Australia.
Fellow Australian. Awesome. I love you, Simon.
Simon Horton says Revelation is by far the best Colin story, in my opinion, the best Dalek serial of all time. Wow, I had no idea you liked it that much, Simon.
I actually love Resurrection. I have
Love that.
absolutely
So do I.
love that story, but
So do I.
Revelation's a close second.
Oh, I mean, you got to also talk about the partnership with him and Nicola Bryant. I mean, my God, probably one of the best partnerships towards, you know, Tom and Liz. You know, it's just it's just heartbreaking how it ends. But during that time, you know, you can really tell that the two love each other. And
For all the surface tetchiness that we've spoken about on this show and everything that sort of gets fired in its direction, I see a lot of tenderness in the relationship. And obviously, yeah, and it's mostly in the quieter moments. I think it starts to come through. They don't spend a great deal of time together in Time Lash after they've argued and bickered and all that sort of thing.
There's a brother and sister sort of relationship.
Well, I'd say it's more traditionally a sort of a student and a teacher, or at the very most an uncle and a niece. But I like the fact how when on the odd occasion where he does play the clown, she gives him a smile, as if the kind of smile as if to say, "Oh, I won't. This is funny, but I don't want to encourage him. I'll just nod my head." It's like when somebody tells a dad joke and she plays along with it. I think there's a lot in that performance. Again, what may not be there on the page, the actors work together out of mutual respect to bring something else. I think that's what you get in this. Even in season 20, it wasn't present in Twin Dilemma, but certainly was in season 22. And so I can get a bit protective of the Perry and Sixth Doctor thing. Yeah, they did. Obviously, it was right for them to not water it down, but it was right for them to evolve it for season 23. And I know that's what the actors wanted, Adam. But I've never seen what people are so adverse to it. Over.
I think there is more of a subtlety in their friendship. I think it's a lot of the stuff you're talking about. You know, the nice side of the Doctor Perry relationship. It's often in a little look or a sly grin to the other. You know, so that like you said, a lot of that is worked out probably in rehearsal, where there is an affection between the two that is understated. It doesn't have to be said out loud. It's just done with a look or a little grin. You know, and it's charming because of that, I think.
And obviously,
yeah, she's frustrated, but she loves him. You know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And obviously, these two actors, Colin Baker and Nicola Bryant, have been working together for 40 years in one another's lives. I very much pick up that they're very, very close friends.
Yeah.
Certainly by all photographs and all accounts, you would like to think that, wouldn't you, Matt? When somebody, you know, we love seeing them on screen or hearing them in our ears. You'd like to think that these people get on, but with Colin and Baker, I think it's more than evident that they seem to glow in one another's company.
It was weird seeing him in the I don't know if you've ever seen it, Dan, the Air Zone solution.
Yes,
where the two of them are in bed and there's like it just feels a bit awkward, you know? But I mean, you can tell that they just have such an amazing chemistry, and it just oozes off screen, and on and off you can tell that they're friends. And I've always loved Nicola Bryant, and for the longest time I didn't even know she was an American. You know, I was surprised when I heard her when she had an English accent during an interview. I was like, gee, she's doing a good English accent. But it's just wonderful to see. It's always wonderful to see them together. It really is. You know, they're like chalk and cheese, but they just have so much love for each other, and it's awesome.
I love that picture.
Mutual respect, mutual respect and love. With the one of them, the more up to date one.
Yes, yeah, the most recent, because you can just see that there's such affection between the two, and I think it's genuine. You can't fake that. When you see them on stage together or at conventions, it's clear that they've become very good, very close over all these years. Yeah, it's a lovely picture, that.
A lovely time in the mid 80s, for, as I say, for all of the ups and downs of the Sixth Doctor's era, it is one that's very special to me. And as I say, I just always got it. I always appreciated what he was doing,
Hello.
Matt. And the mid 80s was a time of change for me that I did find unnerving. You know, I was starting secondary school and moving on, and the prospect that I might lose not just my favourite TV show for 18 months, but my hero, my childhood hero for good. It was more than I could bear, really. And so that big gap between seasons 22 and 23 was really cruel. It was just when I think I needed Doctor Who the most. But Colin, always the hero then, as he is now, courageous, committed, and example, as Ian was saying, of an ambassador for all of us. I don't think he would describe himself as a fan, but because he understands us and the appeal of the show, he's willing to represent it. Even how many years after? Like 37 years after he departed the role on screen in the eyes of the British public. Now, he did return. I mean, do you count dimensions in time? Does Colin count dimensions in time? I sort of do. And I think if Colin counts it, then I'll count it. But last year he did appear on screen again, didn't he? Now, Matt, I know you didn't see much of the Jodie Whittaker era, did you? But
I saw that one. I did. I did see that one. Yeah, that was only just to make sure that she went out the door. So, but other than that, that was the only ever one I've watched. So yeah, and of course it had Colin in it, and I only watched it because I heard that Peter Davison was in it. So I was really surprised to see Colin in it, and so yeah, that was awesome. That was a great thing. That was probably the best thing out of it. Having 5 years of not watching any Doctor Who, and then all of a sudden there's a Doctor, and I just
Yeah, he was there. It was a surprise to some, but I think that we had a few whispers about his involvement, Adam. And obviously they had limited screen time, the Doctors, but they have an aura about them, don't they? And arguably that story, in my view, it's far messier than any of the stories that we can look at from Colin's era. Not a lot of it makes a great deal of sense, but
I'll take your word for it, Dan.
This actor back in this role, and you know what? I'll take 6 seconds of Colin Baker playing the Doctor over 6 seasons of the Jodie Whittakers, for example. Just it really would. So when you watch The Power of the Doctor and Colin and all of the classic Doctors, but particularly Colin were there on screen, was it a surprise to you? And how did it make you feel to see him there again?
I think it was a surprise. I'd heard rumblings, but then you hear rumblings all the time, so you sort of take it with a pinch of salt. So I was kind of surprised. I think more of the way that they were in it as well, this sort of kind of middle, sort of stuck in the middle of a generation or whatever they were supposed to be on, that sort of, what was this, the other, what do they call it? The Edge, that's what I was trying to look for. So it was a surprise to see them. And I think we saw, if I remember rightly, David Bradley's Doctor first. I remember being physically like, oh, it kind of woke me up a little bit, like what's going on? So it was lovely to see them back. And I do think the costumes as well, they've kept it nice and simple, rather than trying to put them back in their old costumes, which might have not have worked, I don't know. But to put them in these new robes was, I think, kind of respectful. So I did like that. And yeah, it was the only thing I kept thinking was, this is kind of what I was expected to see in the 60th episode. So it felt almost like it was getting thrown in too soon. I don't know. But either way, like you said, it was just great to see Colin back on screen as the Doctor.
I was a bit disappointed that he didn't show up as a hologram. So in his old uniform, that would have been in his own costume. That would have been brilliant. But of course, then therefore he had no one really to talk to. So,
that's right,
it was just nice to see him on screen. Yeah.
Well,
it was just nice to see him on screen.
I was waiting for Tom's booming voice. I kept thinking, okay, we've got Colin, Peter. I kept thinking,
I didn't want him in there at all.
You didn't?
No, I didn't want Tom. I didn't want Tom in there at all because I think that would have really made it legitimate. And so, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, Colin, kind of, in my view, stole the show a little. I mean, yeah, maybe Paul McGann got the best line with the one about the robes, but
Yeah.
we'd seen Peter
I love them
back
arguing.
before,
They're awesome.
and I think Sylvester, he'd had the TV movie. For me, this was Colin Baker's moment. Back in the role that turned him into a screen legend, I think, and the role that he certainly says was the biggest of his life. His doctor back in the 80s or now, whether you're listening to them on audio, however you're discovering them, whether you're streaming them or buying the Blu-rays for the very first time, I think that this take on the character is not only as valid then as it was now, I think it's aged very, very well. We spoke earlier on about how Peter Capaldi, his take, his characterization was kind of similar. And I think that could help people who are sort of coming to these stories for the first time, because it's not new ground that somebody's breaking anymore. Maybe they'll see it more for what it is. And yeah, of course, I'd have loved more of the Sixth Doctor played by Colin Baker on screen, but I'd rather celebrate and savour what we did get than continually sort of lament what went wrong and what was never to be. And I think that Colin is very much of that mind too, Adam. I think he's not one to stew on things. I think we would view that as unhealthy and not in the spirit of sort of seizing the opportunities of at a given
One thing
time.
I've seen about Colin, and I've got to give him kudos, is the fact that he's never shown any jealousy towards or malice towards Sylvester McCoy. He's just embraced him. The fact that this man took over his role, even though he knew that this was going to happen, and it could have been anyone. He didn't have. There are some people who have had their roles taken over by others, and they just will not acknowledge them at all, And he has been. I mean, they do conventions together. They've done the three doctors. What was it called?
Five Doctors.
Yeah. They did that together. He's never ever said a bad word about. He still calls him Sylv. And so he's never ever said a bad word about him. No. And I can understand why he would have so much malice towards this other actor who took his role. But he has never ever. He's just been the constant gentleman.
I never looked at it that way. But you're absolutely right.
Yeah, you're spot on, Matt. I was thinking that earlier, actually, about how well him and Sylv get on at conventions and stuff. And considering, Colin was very upset about the way he was treated, and quite rightly so. Like, for him to just be able to just get over that and get on with Sylvester in the way he does is a testament to Colin, I think. And the fact, like you said, that Dan, that he's just, he's let it go.
We've got a comment here from Richard Brooks who says, "Who wants a grumpy companion? I always wanted to be the Doctor, but many fans fantasized about being the companion." They did. Matthew Pounder preferred Colin to Davison. Like him or loathe him, his Doctor had more of a personality. As a Davison fan, I kind of agree. I can't argue. I can't argue with that, Matthew. I hope one day Perry comes back to Doctor Who. Don't we all? Time Lord 2023. Maybe she'll be next. Colin Baker. Colin Baker wanted. He wanted to dress completely differently. That's also well documented. And he wanted.
He pulls it off though, Dan. He does pull that garish. It's even though it's so garish and so sublime, the whole it's just a big explosion of color. He does it works. It defines his Doctor.
Back to the relationship between Colin Baker and Nicola Bryant here with a comment here from the live chat on YouTube from Sam, who says Nicola tweeted a lovely happy birthday tribute to Colin today. I haven't seen that. I'll have to go looking for that. I love it when they do that. It's wonderful. Yeah. What else is here? Shaman-like costumes. That's the Edge Doctor's robes, isn't it? Richard Brooks is here trying to, he's canonizing Dimensions in Time as Omega messing with the Doctor. You could be right. And Mega the Extremist says, I prefer Colin to Hartnell, Davison, and McCoy. That's right. I said it. No, I don't think there are any wrong answers on
No.
favourite doctors.
Everybody's got their favourite doctor.
Yeah.
Actually, Matt,
I
as
rank Colin very highly.
As this is our first time on the stream together, Matt, who is your favourite Doctor? Just curious.
I'm with Peter Davison, but
Davison.
yeah, only because like he was literally the one that first regenerated, because here in Australia we had John Pertwee and Tom Baker for the longest time. So it was John Pertwee, then Tom Baker, then he'd revert back to John Pertwee again. So it was just a constant thing, and then all of a sudden Peter Davison, and it's like, that's my doctor.
It's nice to hear Davo getting some love, because he does get a bit forgotten, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, as I've always said, Peter Davison was way more approachable, even towards Colin. You know, I would have approached Peter Davison more than Colin's doctor. You know, I would feel really safe with Peter Davison. You know, the fact that, you know, if I'd have travelled with him, it would have been, like I said, you know, being a 7-year-old, you know, 8-year-old, I would have loved to have travelled with him more than Colin. But Colin, I think I would have worried that I would have died in each episode. I mean, it looks like
I was thinking
like
of
Barry
Adric, but,
survived, you know.
yeah, that's true.
Cybermat Strike says only Colin can pull off his costume. I don't think anyone else would have the strength to match it.
I think there's some truth in that. I said it earlier, didn't I? You've got to have a big personality.
Complain about that costume. Sorry, out of all the costumes besides Tom, it is actually one of the most iconic.
I was determined that this edition of Type 40 Live wasn't going to turn into a show all about the hiatus, all about the costume, because I do feel that these things unnecessarily overshadow a really full era of the show and a fantastic characterization by Colin Baker, and I think we've done that this evening. I think we've delivered
you know, it works so well. His whole era is Colin Baker era. You can't put any other Doctor in that era. You just can't. Whereas some others you can. It's just like that is Colin Baker's era, and it's and also I'm sort of glad that it is only a couple of seasons, only because it's really shown. The Doctor really shone in those episodes, you know. And I just I love it. I could watch it, you know. Tomorrow I could watch a Colin Baker you know, serial. I really could. It was just it's just you know, it's just a shame how he was treated behind the scenes, but then you just look at what he has taken from it and how he has evolved, and I love the Sixth Doctor. I really do.
The way I see it, Matt, why Colin doesn't dwell on it, so why should we?
That's a great way of looking at it. Yeah.
The Sixth Doctor, Colin Baker, still performing in this role on audio all this time later, still engaging with the fans at conventions and signings and all those things. I raise my glass, my mug to you, sir, and say happy birthday, Colin Baker. The Sixth Doctor very much lives, certainly has masses of fans, and I believe that those stories, personally, I believe those stories have aged very, very well. Let us know what you think in the comments section. Let us know what your favourite Colin Baker story is. I'm all ears, and we'll get involved with the conversation. We'll compare notes.
Greetings, I am K9. If you have an inquiry and Siri or Alexa cannot help, maybe I can. Have you ever wondered if time travel is possible? Or what can a sonic screwdriver do? I may have the answers. Please leave your questions in the comments below.
Yes, Colin Baker. Happy 80th birthday, Colin Baker. And here we are live streaming to YouTube and Facebook for the love of who and for the love of Colin Baker's Doctor. And we're not alone. The fan base loves him. I think he loves the fan base. Cosplayers, they jump on this. The challenge of recreating Colin Baker's coat is one that many cosplayers do unbelievably take up. I think costumes, some more accurate than others. Some of them are sort of fantasy versions of the Sixth Doctor that take place in between the seasons, I'd like to think. But this is another thing that I love about the Doctor Who fan base. As ever, we're rounding things off with a look, a scroll across the view screen, and it's a regular eye on the fan community, the creative fan community, fan art in particular, traditional and digital, to see which artists out there have captured, in this case, the Sixth Doctor in the most interesting, creative and contrasting of ways. Now, if you are a fan artist, or you know a fan artist that we'd like to see, you think we'd like to see, we'd like their work, or you just like our opinion of them, please let us know about them. Get in touch through our social medias on Instagram and Twitter, or join the Type 40 Facebook group and send us a link to their online portfolio or Instagram page or whatever else. First of all, I've got this one from Joanne 13. This is a wonderful sort of watercolor illustration of the Sixth Doctor there, gone kind of rainbow-esque with the waistcoat. And there's even though this is romanticized, it looks like an illustration from a kid's book, she's kind of caught Colin's smug, authoritarian smile, I think, there, as if, and the breeze is gently wafting at his curls. Adam, are you convinced?
Do you know what, Dan? I actually really liked that. It's very different, you know, and I mean that in a good way. It's just unusual in the style. You know, it's watercolor, is it?
Yeah, and the reason why I think this works is the same reason that John Ridgway's Doctor Who comic strips work with Colin Baker's Doctor, because he does seem, when he's on paper, and because there's so much to work with that costume, artists can do so much with it.
Yeah,
he
that's
looks
true,
like a character from a children's, from a picture book, from a Rupert the Bear comic strip, something like that.
I just think it's a really nice. It's very different. There's an essence of Colin in the face, like you said, but it doesn't look like Colin. But it's got an essence to it, and I think the use of colour is really nice. I actually really like that.
I've always struggled with painting, Matt. It's one of the artistic sort of practices that I haven't pursued. Are you a painter, and do you like watercolour? And what do you make of this?
No, I'm not a watercolor person, but it's beautiful. I'm not a fan of rainbows for obvious reasons.
They get somewhat overused now, I suppose, don't they?
No, that particular rainbow, yes. But other than that, you know, I love that illustrative look. You know, I'm not really a pen and ink person. Personally, I'm not a pen and ink person, but I appreciate what other people can do with a pen and ink. You know, it's a very nice thing. I mean, it's so easy to stuff up doing artwork and that, but especially when, you know, you've got no Control Z, you've got no undo button, you know.
Undo.
So,
that's a lovely illustration, says Tony L. Outside Matt Strike says, I love it, very original. It shows the character. Very, very nice. Looking at something a little more photo real, I suppose you could call this. This is one of a range of book cover style illustrations by the artist Philip King, and this one's for Revelation of the Daleks. So what he's attempted to do, he uses a lot of shapes, a lot of triangles and diamonds and squares, and these beautifully sort of Alistair Pearson style paintings of doctors and characters and things like that. Adam, you remember the days of the Blue Spine Target books when Alistair was putting new covers on those?
Yeah, this is what I love about art, Dan, especially like Doctor Who art, is look at the contrast. Look at how different that is to the last picture you just showed. And yet I can appreciate them both equally. And I think that is stunning. That is a book cover, isn't it? If you saw that on the Target book or whatever, you would buy it instantly. That's just brilliant.
I like I'm looking at Colin's face there, and just the tone, the light there on his face and the cloak. Come to think of it, Matt,
it illustrates Davros, the fact that he became more colourful even in Colin Baker's. You know, he was just more mauve and black and white. You know, whereas as soon as it was in the Colin Baker era, you know, there was a lot of blue and red colour. He was a lot more colourful in in that particular era. And the contrast between that and the coat, I love it.
The details on Davros's face there are fantastic.
I mean, it looks
aren't they?
almost like photorealistic, you know. It's
Creases,
that well done.
the creases and the bevels and the jowls of Davros. Matthew Pounder says it reminds me of the video covers too. I hadn't thought of that, but yeah, it does, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
Sodo Engine says that looks awesome. Great work from Richard Brooks. Fantastic from Ezra Goldstein. Very nice. And a heart emoji
nice.
from Peter Harrington. More very nices. Yeah, I think, it is very, very nice. From one extreme to the other. No, how about this one? This is in the style of, I don't know if you're familiar with their work, the Powerpuff Girls. We've got the Powerpuff Doctor here. What would old Sixie make of this? I don't know whose work this is, so I can't credit them. But I was just hit by the charm of this. For some reason, it just works.
It's cute. It reminds me of what do they call those kawaii? You may know those kawaii. It reminds me of that, like a kawaii picture. Yeah.
Make a good sticker. I think this would, Matt.
It would make a great sticker.
Yeah. I sort of have an interest in Powerpuff Girls. So.
Oh really?
Yeah. It's I'm actually I'm friends with one of the voice artists on it. One that plays Bubbles. But yeah, no, I love that style. I've always have. A lot of my earlier work was very much Powerpuff Girls, and so yeah, I just I love it. I love it. It'd make a good mug.
Peter says that's fun, like a pop vinyl. As Cybermat strikes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, a little
very
bit.
much so.
Yeah.
It's a pity that they didn't continue with that range, because I would have loved to have seen a Colin.
Oh, wouldn't it? Yeah, definitely.
You'd have thought he'd have been one of the.
I really wanted.
You'd have thought he'd have been one of the first ones they'd have done. There's so much possibility there, so much character. The Sodor Engine says, the lost Powerpuff Girl character, Doctor Who. Lots of people like this. Cartoon Network style, says Matthew Pounder. Tara Strong, says the Sodor Engines. Is that who
Tara
voices
Strong?
I've heard of Tara Strong. Yeah, I know exactly who you mean. And
she does a great Buffy.
Does she?
Oh, absolutely. You couldn't tell the difference at all.
To finish off, this is a bit of a classic piece of fan art, which I've always liked. And the Sixth Doctor, going back to the costume again, he's appeared in so many sort of expanded media projects, and there's the whole angle of the blue costume that first appeared in an audio story, didn't it, called Real Time, that was in flash animation on the BBC's website there. So we've got that, and we've got the costume from the Ultimate Adventure as well. He had another costume for that with sort of ruffled cuffs and all that kind of thing. So what the artist Paul Hanley tried to do was to put it all into one picture. So we have 5 Sixth Doctors here with various costume variants, led by the fan favourite blue costume. I have to say, I've never been too enamoured with the blue costume. For me, it's
never understood it. Where is it from, Dan? I don't understand it. I've seen the action figure.
It's from Real Time, which, as I said, was originally an audio drama, but they made it as a flash cast animation on the BBC's website around 20 years ago, and it was picked up and used in various things. And he's referred to in several of the audios as wearing it, but visually, it just doesn't interest me anywhere near as much as Colin's actual costume. I really like the Ultimate Adventure one that we see there to the slight right of that. But I accept I'm in the minority. A lot of people love that blue costume. It looks better with the black waistcoat because it gives it more dynamism, I suppose. But yeah, the blue is very classy, says Lord Thoth. And Peter Harrington also loves the blue from Real Time. I love Real Time, is Richard Brooks. Yeah, see, I'm in the minority here. Most people do really love this. But I thought this is a bit of a fan art classic. And the artist in particular, he's got the expressions on the Doctor's face slightly changing there too with each step and repeat. So I am quite fond of this one. I think it's, even though the character's time on screen was relatively short, it sort of gives it those extra leaves to the book that have been written in expanded media throughout the decades. There's a character options figure, reminds Peter Harrington. Yeah,
there is. That's where I'd originally seen it, and I'm like, It's nice. It's nice when you see it in the action figure form, but I don't think it would have worked in. I think you're right, Dan. It wouldn't have worked in his original era.
Did you see the Ultimate Adventure play, Dan?
I didn't. No, I didn't.
He missed out on it. It's a sore point.
I
we've
remember your
talked about
story.
it.
I remember your story.
Yeah.
I've just come back to you. You were ill or something, weren't you? And you missed it. Is that right?
That's right. He's still going to therapy.
Oh, Dan, sorry to bring that all up again. I'd forgotten. Genuinely.
As it turns out, yeah, it's one of those. Is this one of those? It's the performance that I was supposed to go to, I'd have missed Colin. Actually, no, it was John that was doing it then. I'd have missed John anyway because he fell ill and David Banks had to fill the role, which had been nice.
I saw it with John Pertwee, and when I come out of the show, my mum said, "Did you not see who was sat right behind you?" I'm like, "No, Colin Baker." I'm like, "You're joking?" And I think he literally took over about a week or two after. So maybe he was just going to, because as I said, he used to live local to us, so it's probably his local theatre. Yeah, but I didn't see him. I mean, I went round the back to meet John Pertwee, but I did not know that Colin was sat behind me. But apparently, literally right behind me the whole show.
You keep crossing paths with the great Colin Baker. Once again, many happy returns, Colin Baker. From all of them in the live chat there on YouTube and Facebook who've been joining in with the comments throughout this show, and from us here at Type 40 Live in the console room. As always, if you are a fan artist, digital or traditional, get in touch with us. We'd love to see your work. Share it, and we may get it up on screen. But get in touch with us through our social media on Instagram or Twitter at Type 40 Doctor Who, and you may well see it here in the console room on
and you got to like and subscribe as well.
Edition of Type 40 Live. Do as the man says. Yes, please
if you like and subscribe.
Yeah, we've got a lot coming up in the 60th anniversary year. It's so much bubbling up, loads that we haven't even got into, so much about Colin Baker's tenure that we've barely even touched on just in this show. Of course, we'll be looking at some of it in depth at one time or another. We've got all the time in the world, all the time and space that we need to continue picking away at 60 years worth of Doctor Who as we head up to those specials in November. I can't wait. I sincerely can't wait, and I bet Colin will be watching too. I'd like to think that he will. Okay. One last look in the live chat, I think, just to see what people have got to say. Awesome live stream. Hope you all have a good weekend. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Tony.
And lots of excellence.
Love beyond good and evil.
Colin. Poor old Dan, people sympathising with me about missing the ultimate adventure. I've had to live with it ever since. But help is at hand. I will be seeing it. At last seeing it. I've heard it. I've heard the audio version, but I'm going to get to see it fairly soon. More on that on another show. Now, make sure you have some party poppers left over and something fizzy or cheeky or both in the fridge, because on the next Type 40 Live, we'll be celebrating. We're doing some celebrating of our own on the 100th edition of Type 40 Live. Of course, there'll be our usual mix of conversation, banter, news, nostalgia, picks, and knob gags. I'm sure you'll forgive us. A little indulgence to mark our show hitting those treble figures, Type 40 Live 100 soon. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the cloister bell so you get all the notifications about what we're doing next and when we're doing it. More live streams, podcasts, extra videos, and everything else we've got coming up with all our panelists and all our awesome guests too. Thanks for coming back, Adam. I hope you've enjoyed yourself again.
Certainly did. Yeah, I loved it, mate. Thanks for having me back.
Wonderful. And Matt, you've got up. I'm going to ask you again. You're a real life time traveller. Give us the first word on Friday. How's it looking so far for you, mate?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful day today.
Oh dear.
Awesome stuff.
Fun times.
Happy birthday, Doctor. Many happy returns, Colin. But that's it for another one. We'll see you next time. Take care, everybody. We always have the time. If you have the space here at Type 40, watch the doors. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Oh, it's been a long one.
You have been watching Roland Rat, the series. And now, back to BBC One for Doctor Who, the series.